across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. Absolute pleasure to have your company. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. We're also the home of, I know Jacob's accused of being a bit grouchy this morning, but there is... Genuinely, in my daily life, at home, actually really a happy person. Got a great life. Very, very happy in my home life, my family, my friends, my work. But there are some days when you wake up to so many infuriating stories and so little being done about those infuriating stories, apart from, the usual, lessons learned, all that nonsense you hear from about every topic, that it is just impossible to not just be ranting and raving and railing against the world. It is extraordinary how many stories today are just about the result of basic abject lack of common sense and frankly, morality in our government, in terms of the abject failures to do what is the right thing by the people of this country. And we're going to talk about all of those topics. I bet you can guess what some of those are throughout the show. But whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is wonderful to have your company. And don't forget, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. But coming up in this hour, among the many stories we're going to be talking about, includes this Afghan asylum seekers who attacked a schoolgirl, orally raped her at the age of 15, knew exactly what they were doing. Thankfully, she had her phone on and managed to film a lot of it, so they were convicted, sentenced to about 10 years yesterday. Not a surprise, shocker, that yet another Afghan national has been arrested and charged this morning, will appear in criminal court this morning. Now, of course, that is a case that is still sub judice, a case where innocence and guilt still needs to be decided, and we need to bear that in mind. But it doesn't really surprise us when you've got a vigilante group effectively being formed by the local community in Crowborough and East Sussex, simply because they're about to have 500 plus asylum seekers being put in a camp right next to a bus stop for a school. And they're in their tiny little town, and they're thinking maybe our young women, our young girls are not going to be safe, because, yeah, statistically, they probably won't be. So we're going to talk about all of that. We're also going to talk about the teacher who's been banned from working with children after telling a Muslim child that Britain is still a Christian state. Now, the primary school teacher was referred to his local child protection board over comments made to the pupil at school in London. It's a recent case. There's intensified concern among free speech campaigners that laws intended to keep children safe are actually being deployed to crack down on right-wing views. We discussed the case yesterday of the former Royal Marine who was told he couldn't work with his daughter's football team as a coach because he'd been accused of inciting racial hatred in comments he'd made on a Facebook video post after Southport, even though he'd been found not guilty by a jury in just 17 minutes. We're also going to be talking about the Sandy Peggy case. Now, this is the nurse who went into a changing room just before Christmas in 2023 and needed to change her clothes and then found a man in there. Now, the man called himself Dr. Beth Upton, but he's a man. He thinks he's living as a woman, but he's a man. She objected. She raised concerns. He accused her of bullying because she didn't want a man in the woman's changing room. Well, it all went to Employment Tribunal, and she did win part of her claim against NHS 5 yesterday. Judge ruled it was that she had been bullied by the hospital in terms of their treatment of her. However, they also ruled it was not inherently unlawful for a doctor who is a man, well, however he trans-identifies, to use a female hospital changing room. And it wasn't a problem until she complained. Also, because he, had long hair and wore apparently feminine clothing, apparently that means it wasn't an issue. So what was the Supreme Court ruling all about? We're going to be talking about that. Also going to be talking about migrants crossing the Channel in small boats now apparently being given a free ride or a cheap journey in return for bringing heroin into Britain. What a surprise. And also two-tier policing of protests is a reality. Well, we knew that already, but a new policy exchange report of the think tank has said that basically metropolitan police are operating two-tier policing when it comes to policing those protests, and they recommend that the London Mayor Sadiq Khan has no longer got the faith of Londoners, should be stripped of his responsibility overseeing the police. There's loads more coming up, including the lunacy of the NHS saying, oh, you should wear masks, there's flu. Schools closing down because of that. Oh, yes, and the Navy chief warning that basically we are not in a position to defend ourselves in the Atlantic against Russian attacks on our cables, on our networks, communications, and, of course, gas and pipelines and the like. So we are... We are in a bad state, people. We are in a bad state. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of the big stories. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. All together now. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Delighted to say, joining me today regularly on a Tuesday is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Where do we start?
Quite.
Where do we start? I was sort of thinking, I mean, I was asked a question on social media about this, you know, trans women, trans-identified men. And we were thinking, well, should we ask about the asylum seekers? But there's a case that's just going to court. I don't want to incite anybody to... Of
course.
You know, we never, ever want to prejudice a trial. People are entitled to a fair trial, both the person who's the accuser and the person who's the accused. But also this teacher banned after telling a Muslim child that Britain is a Christian country. But I think these stories kind of all blend into one of just a... When did common sense leave this country? I mean, I don't think it's left the general public, but I think in terms of our politicians, much of our media, they're part of the problem. The judiciary, people running schools, the people running hospitals and everyone, I think they've all gone stark staring mad.
No, exactly, because so many of the stories that we're looking at this morning and tearing our hair out, wondering how the hell did we get here, would never have happened if even a modicum of common sense prevailed in this country. If you had a government or a series of governments that realised, you know what, you shouldn't allow men in women's changing rooms, the whole Sandy Peggy thing.
When did that become a controversial statement?
We would never know who Sandy Peggy was. She would be happily working in Fife. And
changing in a changing room with other women.
Exactly. Similarly, if at some point someone had decided that it was actually kind of all right, or maybe we don't have to do too much about it, that we're allowing untold numbers of young men to break into the country illegally, often from cultures which don't have a particularly enlightened view of women, shall we say.
No, they hate women. They're second-class citizens. They're regarded as property. Let's call it what it is.
No, at some point in time, people thought we could be relaxed about that because of our commitments to the human rights.
Diversity is our strength.
So, again, if a modicum of common sense was applied, that would never have happened. If you look at so many of the things which are roiling us as a society at the moment, if you picked the average person on the street and asked them what we should do, they would have come up with a much better solution than the ones that we've ended up with. And it's the fact that it's all kind of coming home to roost all at the same time just makes it particularly depressing and particularly pressing that something is done to bring us back to something.
And it is just a general sort of, like, as you say, tearing your hair out. Well, what's going on? When did this all happen? When did the madness start? But the madness has to end, that's for sure. Let's start in terms of detail. Let's talk about a 15-year-old girl snatched from a park, raped by two teenage Afghan asylum seekers. She has a video of it. There's CCTV of her being dragged into the park on May the 10th. This is Afghans Jan Yahanzeb and Isra Niyazal. They arrived just months earlier, small boats, of course they did. They assaulted the 15-year-old in the park. She'd been drinking with mates, as look a lot of 15-year-olds do. And she was dragged away and then forced into oral rape, basically. Her first sexual experience, she's told the court, absolutely horrific. Is now completely affected. I mean, as you can imagine, how terrified she would have been. They've both been jailed for around the 10-year mark. But I think what's really interesting is the judge, Judge Sylvia de Bertodano. She's actually does a lot of work in the International Criminal Court. She said some really interesting things, because she said, I accept that you come from a place which has significant cultural differences from the UK. Call it what it is. A culture where women have zero rights, OK? However, I don't accept that either of you does not understand the concept of consent. So, fair enough. I'm satisfied that you both knew perfectly well what you were doing was criminal and wrong. Then she goes, you have betrayed the interests of those like you who come here fleeing harm and seeking safety. And for that, you should feel a deep and lasting sense of shame. I mean, they came from France. They came from France. And by the way, the people who need to flee Afghanistan are the women who are being raped by men, young men like that. Because if you're not covered up and if you're not in your home, you're frankly asking for it. That's the attitude of those young men, I'm afraid.
And this is one of those things where, before it became verboten to talk about this, you could easily go on a human rights website, an Amnesty International website, and they would talk about the particular issue of sexual violence in a country like Afghanistan, kind of pre and post and in between Taliban.
Completely normalised, taking and boys. Basically the taking of a boy is basically a pet to rape.
And again,
they literally do that.
Rapists going unpunished, their victims ending up being punished, honour killings in response to women falling victim to sexual violence. This is something which we know goes on, and yet because of the fact that it's interwoven now with our arguments around migration, illegal migration, asylum, people who would be very comfortable even suggesting that, say, Britain had a problem with rape culture because of lab mags or something, suddenly clam up and refuse to accept that maybe there's any risk from allowing unchecked, I stress unchecked, men from these parts of the world into the country.
Is that intersectionality nonsense, isn't it? Because Afghanistan men are largely going to be Muslim men, and Muslims are at the bottom of the pile when it comes to I mean, it used to be the women or gay people. No, now it's trans people and Muslims. They're at the bottom of the pile in this intersectionality of who's a victim and who's not a victim. White men like you, ooh, very much near the top. White women like me, pretty near the top. Just one down, one below, and therefore, well, they must be victims. Well, no, we've imported more rapists. And again, as I was saying to JK, this thing that never happens just keeps on happening. Okay, we've had cases in Epping. These are not one-off cases. And by the way, one of the other crucial things about this, absolutely crucial, is that the courts, I mean, it was actually the Daily Mail which had legally challenged the decision not to name these men. What, because they're under 18? Yeah, they're rapists. But basically, one of the barristers defending one of the men had asked the judge to stop the press from even being able to say the boys were Afghan asylum seekers because there'd be problems. And one of the other lawyers pointed out, I've no doubt that if the general public were exposed to the phone footage that the girl had filmed of her attack, basically, we would have disorder on our hands. Oh, I mean, look, I don't think we should have that footage because I think that, what that girl went through, I don't want anyone else, seeing it other than the jury needing to see it. But I mean, the idea that, don't expose it because there'll be hatred towards these people. We are entitled to hate young men who forcibly orally rape a 15-year-old girl. Absolutely. It is an appropriate and reasonable reaction.
It's right to be angry about that as well. It's not to say that people should take matters, into their own.
I want the courts to take the action, not me. But it's an appropriate reaction. Well, here's the thing: we've got another man, an Afghan national. Now, again, this case has not come to court yet. Very important that you don't prejudice this by posting something or something. But Sultani Bakatash, 28 years old, he has been charged with 2 counts of rape of a girl aged under 16, 1 count of sexual assault, 1 count of assault by penetration. He was arrested early on Sunday morning following a report of an alleged rape at a flat in Middle Hulton in Bolton. And he's been remanded in custody. He's going to appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court this morning. So it's the rape of 2 teenage girls. Now, again, hasn't come to court yet. People entitled to defence and a presumption of innocence. But the allegations keep coming, and the convictions of the cases that have come to court do keep on coming for this thing that never happens. And so when you get, for instance, the local people at the East Sussex town of Crowborough, when you get these people saying, we don't want to have a camp with over 550 young men who've arrived from undocumented men arriving from the Middle East or Africa or wherever, to be turning up and living right next to us, and at the this camp is literally not miles in the middle of nowhere, it's right next to the small town. And they're now forming, they say, vigilante patrols. I mean, they're not. It's community safety. Community safety. This is good citizens protecting young girls and women from a potential risk. I mean, you can understand why they do that.
Of course, because they've noticed something that the government refuses to acknowledge, which is that if you combine, we've talked about some of the cultural factors from people coming from different parts of the world. Yeah. As we've said, with very, very different lowly views of women and so forth, the risk that potentially poses. You layer on top of that the question of illegal migration, which really, as a migration policy, selects for wrong-uns. Yeah. Because if you're willing to break into a country illegally, it's quite likely you are willing to commit other crimes, have committed other crimes
Carry
in other countries,
heroin for your smugglers.
might be running away from charges in other countries, which we've seen repeated time and time again. So you put those two things together, and it is a recipe for cases like this, I'm sorry. And it's one of those things where we the reason the British public are having to protest outside of hotels or having to set up kind of these kind of community watch groups to go around and report things to the police because they're worried that otherwise horrific cases like we've read about in recent days are going to happen in their neck of the woods, is because the government refuses to acknowledge it and the state more broadly refuses to control its borders and also police the people.
But even when it does happen, they brush it under the carpet and they try and keep it secret. The idea that people shouldn't be told the nationality of anyone who's in court. I mean, I'm sorry, I was a trained news reporter. I sit in court. You know, you're allowed to. What are you allowed to report once someone is charged? You know, their name, their not their full address, but you know, you're able to identify them. Part of the court process is being identified, unless there's a specific reason not to. But this idea, oh well, those ghastly, awful British people might riot or get angry if they find out it's an Afghanistani or it's an asylum seeker. It's like, no, we just want to know so we can have a proper debate. The reason why the government did not want to publish any of these statistics about migrant crime, whether people who've arrived here legally or people who've arrived here illegally. There is an issue with higher rates of criminality among, let's face it, largely men from certain countries. Also, if you import more people of a certain age range, you know, young men are responsible for almost entirely all crime. So if you import a whole load of young men from largely crime-ridden countries, you know, don't be surprised. I mean, it's not a mystery. And again, when people like me and you and others who've been pointing this out for a long time talk about this stuff, I think you're just xenophobic.
And it's just to go back very briefly, Julie, to the comments that the judge made in the case in Leamington Spa. She does have a point, which is to say, obviously not in relation to the individuals themselves, but the more that governments preside over this complete free-for-all, the more that any public backing for any form of asylum policy, whether it's for Ukrainians or whether it's for Hong Kongers or who knows, will completely evaporate. Because people, if they do not feel that this is being controlled and they do not feel it's not safe, that it has no kind of proper democratic legitimacy, you're going to inflame the issue of asylum. And also around the edges, though this is not an excuse for it, but it's just common sense to point this out, the more you're going to kind of inflame kind of race relations in this country more broadly. There's not an excuse for it, but you can see that the more these issues are let to run out of control, the further we get away from the
before
supposedly,
you confront it. And the more people feel there is more of a cover-up, the more untrusting people become, but not unreasonably. What do you make of this? Because I think this is a difficult one. This, to me, is not as clear-cut as the case of the Royal Marine we discussed on the show yesterday, who was basically told he couldn't work with his own daughter and her own. This is Jamie Michael in her football coaching in a football coaching role, because he'd been found not guilty of any illegality after a Facebook video in the wake of the Southport riots about migrants. But this is a teacher, a primary school teacher. He's not been named. He or she, I don't know whether which no, it's a he. He was banned from working with children after he told a Muslim child that Britain is still a Christian state. Now, the context of this was, it was a year 6, so the final year of primary school, and boys were washing their feet in the sinks for washing their hands. So obviously, you don't want people doing that, but the reason they were doing that obviously was ahead of prayer. Now, this is at a school that is officially a non-faith school, and prayers have been basically informally banned from the playground, and by extension that meant you don't wash your, because part of Muslim prayer is washing your feet beforehand. It's confined to a prayer room set aside for the purpose. So he tried to explain to the year 6 class the importance of British values of tolerance, and he said that Islam remained, it's alleged he said, Islam remained a minority religion in the UK, and that Britain is still a Christian country. The King is the head of the Church of England. Now, these are all simple statements of fact. Now, I do think it depends on how it was stated. It is also claimed, he said, look, there's a religious school down the road. If you want to go to a religious school, you should go to a religious school. Now, I don't think it's appropriate to tell 10-year-olds you should go to another school. So I'd need to know exactly what was said. The problem is there's going to be one adult in the room, realistically, unless there's a teaching assistant there to corroborate anything, and a bunch of kids. So it's difficult to know. But he's basically been sacked and banned from this. But as far as I can tell, what he said was entirely factual. No,
exactly. Just pointing out the fact that we are normally a Christian country, that we do have a church which is
it's an official
state church. You do have the fact that
you and I think you're an atheist as well, I think, but we are nevertheless ruled by Christian reality. We have our public holidays are all Christian public holidays.
We have an established church. It's just one of those things where obviously that's clear cut. I get the point about the fact that there is always going to be context to this. How was it said? Was there a particular venom and what have you? But at the same time, it seems to me that unless there's something that we really don't know, unless he was, peppering his comments with anti-Muslim slurs or something, that even if he got a little bit over his skis, there shouldn't have been something that would lead to him being sacked and dismissed and so on. And it's quite clear that if you combine the hyper kind of sensitivity around these issues which exists in schools, I mean, it seems like he could have said anything about any other religion and nothing
wouldn't have
really
been an
happened.
issue, exactly.
Then you're creating a situation where teachers are having to walk on eggshells, even whilst saying things which are factually accurate. So
it's a good thing he didn't show them a picture of a cartoon from Charlie Hebdo of the Prophet Muhammad, or he'd be in hiding right now rather than sacked.
Exactly, as we all know.
Choices, people.
This is at the kind of the more vanilla end of what can happen, where teaching and Islam and intolerance.
I'm worried as we're having this conversation that of course it sounds like it's really it's just really all these stories about Muslims. Again, I think it's sort of not necessarily relevant. The Afghan asylum seekers being Muslim, but again, that is part of the culture of that country. It's a national issue. But is focusing on that aspect of it, is that Islamophobic? Is that racist? Is it religious intolerance? What is it, or none? None of the above.
I dare say I think I can speak for us both, Julia, which is the reason that we're animated, to put it lightly, by a lot of these stories is because we don't like sexual violence, we don't like censorship, we don't like intimidation of people.
We're old-fashioned like that.
To speak in their minds. Whatever religion or ideology is pushing for that, I really don't care.
Yeah,
of course, we should also point out if there are specific problems, like for instance, there is no other large religious faith in this country who are routinely that we're routinely seeing these controversies around cartoons or what have you. So it's worth pointing that out. But we oppose it because we oppose those things, because we oppose those reactions.
And it's fair and it's reasonable to identify whether there is a cultural or religious aspect to why these problems keep arising.
Exactly. It really is as simple as that. And anyone who just wants to throw names around is just trying to distract from where the real debate needs to be.
Well, let's talk about something that's not related to that, but let's talk about this Sandy Peggy case. This is the nurse who was suspended by NHS 5. She complained about having to share a changing room with Dr. Beth Upton. I love this. I love this. He was born a male but identifies as a woman. No, so is a man, but claims that he wants to live as a woman. He identifies as being a woman, but he isn't a woman because he's a man. Because if you're born a man, you're a man. End of, full stop. Let's just use the word man, not male, OK? We don't give up the words man and woman because some people put on a dress and think they're, or pair of trousers and think they're the opposite sex, because they're not. You can be very sympathetic, do what you want, but you're not the opposite sex. She basically got suspended. She submitted a formal claim to an employment tribunal. Dr. Upton claimed he'd been bullied. She was arguing, I don't want to get changed, and she's changing out of her underwear in a female changing room with a man watching her. She felt that he was very much watching her and felt uncomfortable. I wouldn't care whether he was watching me or not. I'd want him out of the room. I would personally have manhandled him out of the room and taken the hit for it, whatever was necessary. But she sued for a claim for sexual harassment, belief discrimination. Again, believing that men are not women is not a belief. I don't understand why people... It's fact, OK? And victimisation. Those were all dismissed by the judge, but the judge ruled that it was lawful. Extraordinary. The judge ruled that she had been harassed by NHS 5, but that it was lawful for Dr. Beth Upton, a man, to use the changing room until Sandy Peggy, a woman, had complained about it. And the argument is extraordinary. This is Judge Alexander Kemp, a man. He ruled that
How do you know that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm making a guess. He identifies as a man, but he was assigned male at birth. I'm thinking the judge said the trans medic, the male doctor's feminine clothes. I mean, I'm wearing a jacket and jeans. Am I feminine enough today? I don't know. Feminine clothes, hairstyle. He had long hair. And pronouns. Oh, you're using she and her pronouns. Oh, that means you must be a woman then. Should have been taken into account before deciding which facilities should be made available. And he said, there was very far from sufficient reliable evidence to show that biologically male trans people posed a greater risk to women in female changing rooms. Men pose a greater risk to women than women do. We know this. The crime stats are very clear. And because trans-identified men are men, that's why women don't want them in their changing rooms. But basically, he's gone completely against the Supreme Court ruling in April, which made it very clear if it's a female changing room, it's a single-sex changing room, it's for only people who are biologically that sex, which he wasn't. But he was only supposed to be moved if someone complained. So, well, that's a mockery of the actual law.
Yeah. I mean,
this man's an idiot. Hey, judge, you're an idiot.
People who know much more about the law in this area than I are saying that they're really looking forward to this being appealed and picked over again.
I'm sure they're going to they have to appeal
the fact that this thing is like, what, north of 350 pages probably implies how torturous and confused it actually is. As you say, you have the Supreme Court ruling saying that in law under the Equality Act, sex means biological sex, therefore you can have single-sex spaces.
Oh, by the way, can I say, we've got a picture, if you're watching, we've got a picture of Dr. Beth Upton. This is a picture, can you put that picture back up? He's got long hair, so he's obviously a woman, right?
Apparently that's all that
I think
qualifies.
From his size and his... I would certainly go, oh, I think you may be a man.
And yet, apparently, it's like the wording of that judgment is amazing. It's like, put enough effort in and all is forgiven. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But this is precisely why we had to have the Supreme Court ruling, which was to cut through so much of this woolly thinking, this ideology and cowardice that existed within institutions.
But madness, absolute madness.
And as you say, that the argument that's being made, that I do not understand how it's even just logically coherent. So it's not necessarily unlawful for your man to go into the women's changing rooms, except until the point where it's complained about, and then maybe it becomes unlawful. This is obviously convoluted and ridiculous. So I think it's one of those things, a kind of partial victory for Sandy Peggy.
Not good enough.
Not good enough. At the same time, I think more cases will come, and I dare say more will go in her direction.
Yeah, but again, also, if that's the case for women in women's work changing rooms in the NHS, I would like to think that the nurses and doctors working in our hospitals know the difference between men and women. I think that might be quite useful when they're treating us, given that the treatments are rather different for lots of different things. But this is the same organisation, by the way, that that thinks that people have periods and people give birth and people get pregnant. I mean, these people are all mad. This is so infuriating, because this would also apply, presumably, to schools. So a primary school or a secondary school. So until the girls complain about the boy who wants to basically have a look at girls while they're on the toilet, let's be honest, because there are boys that do that.
And this is the point at which single-sex spaces and the protections they're supposed to secure completely break down. You're basically saying, wait until something goes wrong and then we'll talk. It's a ridiculous way to approach it.
Well, and again, I've had friends who, as teenagers, got raped and sexually assaulted. I've got two friends, one was raped, one was sexually assaulted in a bathroom, a public bathroom, but a women's... And it wasn't women who did it. It was men who weren't allowed in those bathrooms. It's like there's a reason why we don't allow them in, right? There's a reason, because we can't tell whether you're one of the good guys or whether you're one of the bad guys. So we keep all the guys out, and all the good guys are happy to keep out because they don't want to do things like that. This absolutely infuriates me. I mean, I know there's going to be a press conference later today, but we're really hoping there's going to be an appeal against this, because people are saying, oh, this is a victory, Sandy Peggy. It really isn't. This is an absolutely devastating defeat for again, literal biological fact. And I just find it absolutely extraordinary. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this and all the topics we're talking about. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch, talkTV on X as well. We're going to take a quick break and we'll get your call straight up. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Let's go to a quick call right now before we go to our next guest. Well, it's all the madness, basically. Ashley is in London and wants to have his say on that judgment in the Employment Tribunal involving the nurse Sandy Peggy and a trans-identified male doctor being in the women's changing room. Morning to you, Ashley.
Morning, Julia.
Hello.
There's not much you can say. For me, the judiciary, not that I expect Lammy to do anything, or the Supreme Court, but the reality is that who's actually leading the laws in this country and the guidance? Because for me, what appears to happen is these judges appear to be totally ignoring it and actually trying to create their own case law to throw these things out in the future.
Yep.
So it's a case of whether or not we want to say we stand up to our rules of our land, and our Supreme Court has ruled, whether you like it or don't like it. These judges should not be in a position. They're not above the law, and they shouldn't be making the law. The law is...
They're supposed to enforce the law. Yeah, exactly.
They're meant to enforce the law.
This judge also made it was an interesting little statement at one point, referred to someone being, assigned female at birth. Well, that's just the sort of madness you hear from backbench Labour MPs. You're not assigned female at birth. Someone didn't, look down at the baby and go, oh, well, what should we call it, a boy or a girl? You know whether it's a boy or a girl, unless you're in the tiny percentage, not less than 1% of babies where there are some intersex, issues. But that's not most people. You're not assigned female at birth. Any judge that uses that phrase is clearly captured.
It makes me sick, I've got to be honest. Every time I hear that word, it makes me all queasy. I just look at it and think, come on.
They're mad.
It's the simplest thing, right? The simplest thing that some loon, whether it's in government, in the civil service, comes up with these things and then makes everyone believe it. Now, well, amazing. Maybe they did. How do they get people to actually believe this stuff? Kids are kids. We're male, we're female. That's how we're born. What someone chooses at a later stage in life, or how they want to live their life, is totally on them. But it isn't reality that you're assigned at birth.
It's just, but it's all mad.
That you're going to smoke.
Someone invented it. Sorry about the quality of the line, by the way, people listening, but I wanted to persevere with that. But again, it's all started about 12, 13 years ago, and it's all been mad. And people are going to look back at this in 10, 20, 30 years' time. Literally, everyone went mad. This is going to be up there with the sort of the Salem witch trials. Everyone just went insane for a little while, and then they went insane again. And one of the things we try and do in the show is try and basically move back to sanity quicker than otherwise. Ashley, thank you for that. Everyone's saying, it's just a woman's thing. It really isn't. Men are just as angry about this. And by the way, especially dads of daughters, funnily enough. Let's go to David. He's in Gloucestershire. And David, you want to talk about some of these cases involving, asylum seekers accused of or convicted of raping teenage girls here in Britain.
Morning, Julia.
Morning.
Well, yes, because... Well, I've got a daughter. She's a couple of years younger than that little, poor little girl, and I worry sick about it. I'm absolutely worried sick.
Yep.
She walks to school and everything, and I am absolutely terrified what might happen. And I shouldn't have to be like this. But where are our political leaders? Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage from Keir, from Kemi, from Nigel, from the politicians, all the MPs in Parliament?
I think, to be fair, I think Reform are talking about it. I think Kemi Badenoch is talking about it. But the key thing is, but the argument will be, we've got plenty of our own wrong-uns. Most rapes and sexual assaults in this country are committed by British nationals, brackets, white people, /white people, because the majority of the country is white. And therefore, you're just being racist, getting upset at this one particular set of crimes. That's what they'll say.
I know that's what they'll say, but it's just, well, okay, well, let's assume that we have, let's not assume, we know we've got wrong-uns in this country. I grew up in the 70s and it was don't talk to a stranger, don't get in a strange car. I grew up in that period, there wasn't the number, so, let's be honest, if you take that line, but you don't go importing people.
Yeah, if we've got a problem at home, not a good idea to import more wrong-uns, I think would be the argument. David, thank you so much. Again, I've got a teenage daughter, older than yours, but yeah, we all have the same concerns. Thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break, then we're going to talk to Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes, get his thoughts on all the big stories of the day. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:40 is the time. Let's talk to Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes. Very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Phil, I should mention your full title, Deputy Leader of Durham County Council, because it still tickles me. I've known you for a long time. I don't even know where to start with you today, Darren, because Tom and I were just talking about there are so many stories that just making us enraged today. But I do think we need to talk about the Afghan asylum seeker attackers, 17-year-olds who orally raped a 15-year-old schoolgirl. She apparently had video footage, thank God, helped get them convicted, and they have been sentenced, and a good decent sentence. Not they'll serve all of it, but the fact that the court was trying to stop us knowing they were Afghan nationals and to know that they were Afghan asylum seekers makes you wonder. Why would that not be something we would be allowed to know? And how many other cases have we been stopped from knowing that?
Absolutely. Julia, I know of a case in County Durham that I'm, as you're acutely aware, not allowed to talk about in any detail. But it fills me with absolute horror, because if I know of a case, I speak to other councillors up and down the country, they say they know of cases in their local areas, and then we read about this story in which actually the legal apparatus tried to actually deny us being told the facts, the truth, the detail. Two Afghans who are here being put up at our leisure. We're paying for them to be here, and we're told that they're fleeing persecution, they're fleeing the very worst vestiges of sort of Taliban oppression, only to come here and brutally rape a young girl in a park. And actually, she filming that attack, as you rightly put it, Julia, if she hadn't done that, what would the defence have been then? Yeah. What would the defence have said about her?
Yeah,
would she have been dismissed?
She was up for it.
Yeah, exactly. Would she have been dismissed as because of the colour of her skin? You know, she's promiscuous. She's all these other things.
She'd been drinking with her mates, you know, so therefore wrong. And I mean, not that we didn't all do that when we were 15. If you had a life, you did.
Yeah, no, damn right, yeah. And you should be able, Julia, I'm not, you know, standing up here and advocating young people going out for a drink. I'm sure you wouldn't want your daughter to go out and do that. But look, what we've got to say, what we've got to say, though, is that people are going to do it and they shouldn't be unsafe in a country like Britain. You know, you should be able to walk about in your own hometown and feel utterly safe, not like you're going to get kidnapped by foreign fellas that ought not be here.
And this is the issue, isn't it? Because we know there is also, you know, we didn't have a mass immigration issue when I was a teenager. You know, there were enough wrong-uns around, but it doesn't mean, let's import some more. And the key thing is, like, this thing that we're told never happens, and people like you and me who talk about it, we're just Islamophobic and racist and bigoted and the like, and you know, and it doesn't happen. But it does just keep on happening, and we keep finding out about it. I mean, no wonder we're told this is a vigilante group in Crowborough in East Sussex, where they're going to be putting some 500 plus men, you know, young, undocumented foreign men arriving illegally on boats, and they're going to be put into this military camp, which is not out in the middle of nowhere, right next to the town. People are understandably worried, and people are saying it's a vigilante group. No, this is Community Watch. This is good citizens protecting vulnerable girls and also women.
Absolutely, it's democracy in action, you know, and I view it as a complete affront to democracy that the legal challenge was trying to argue that there would be riots incited if the public knew the truth about this. You know, I say, how dare you actually turn around and say, insult all of our intelligence to suggest that we're not capable of learning the truth. That's code for actually fearing the righteous anger of the kind of communities that you've just mentioned there, who've had enough of their children being at risk only to protect the multicultural madness and the dogma behind it.
And the ultimate racism behind a lot of these rulings. Now, this judge in this case of these two young Afghan asylum seekers said, you know, you're old enough, you understood what you were doing was criminal and wrong. I know you come from a different culture, but we have had cases where these young men have been let off because they come from a culture where it's absolutely fine to force sex on a woman. So, you know, you're basically having lower expectations. If you have lower expectations of someone because their religion or their race, I think you're racist.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And to be perfectly honest, you know, if you stand up there and say that you're all in favour of women's safety, women and girls' safety, as people like Jess Phillips often do, you know.
And Keir Starmer, goes bangs on about it.
Yeah. Prioritising imported dangers to our children's safety, all actually to sustain a myth that they wish to protect with all their being, of this boundless benevolence that the British state can actually partake in. You know, we need to be serious about this, and I think actually our party saying that you need automatic deportation for criminal migrants, let that be the Afghans' problem, you know, let that be the Taliban's problem. We do not want these people here, and when you are statistically more likely to come here and commit a crime, we'll have to look at the facts presented before us, Julia, not the myths that we want to perpetuate.
Are you sympathetic to what Donald Trump has said? Now, I didn't like his ban on Muslim countries from his first term. That's clearly blatantly unacceptable in my view. But when he's talking about, you know, banning people coming from countries where you've got a heightened risk of criminality in America, I'm thinking, well, yeah, that seems reasonable to me. I would also be very sympathetic to a policy which suggested that maybe we shouldn't be importing large numbers of people from countries who end up being benefit claimants. And there are clearly, you know, the Venn diagram is remarkably round of people who come from certain parts of the world and certain countries where their chances of being a net contributor are virtually zero, and their rate of criminality is certainly higher than the population that is already here and many other foreign nationals who come to this country. It would seem to me to be a perfectly reasonable thing to say, I'm not sure we want to take that risk, and we're not going to allow anyone from those countries. I don't think that is such an unreasonable thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, they told us that we need to follow the science and the evidence on everything during COVID, you know, every damn week. They told us that actually they need to bring about a trial on hormone treatments and puberty blockers for children because we need the evidence there. And now they tell us that we can't actually look at the evidence that says that there are certain groups from certain countries that come here and commit criminality or claim benefits. Look at the post-2019 data. It's there, Julia. We've got the evidence. We know who's committing the crimes, and we know exactly who we need to stop coming to this country.
And again, we're stuck with our own wrong, and there's no reason to bring any more in. Can I ask you about this teacher in a primary school in London? He's not named. I know the Free Speech Union are helping him, but he's been banned from teaching after he told a Muslim child that Britain is a Christian country, which is a factual that King Charles is the head of our established church, and basically he was reprimanding children for washing their feet in the bathroom sinks at the school, basically ahead of prayer, when this is a non-faith school. And he did say, look, there's a faith school down the road, and you should go there if you want to do this. Now, I'm not sure any teacher should be telling kids you should go to another school. I don't like the sound of that. I'd love to know exactly what he said and the manner in which he said it, but ostensibly stating facts about our national, established church and the culture of this country, and that this is a non-faith school, is that a reason for a teacher to be banned?
No, indeed. And I mean, he, ultimately almost sacked and blacklisted for life. And actually, Julia, we've got to be totally blunt here about why it is that the teacher's name has been totally hidden. It's because actually his life would be endangered.
Exactly.
Does that not tell you everything you need to know? We have a suffocating double standard in this age of ours, where actually, we're happy to peddle the trans craze in schools, affirming kids that they can swap genders like outfits with the sort of warm glow of middle class inclusion, But the state stating the obvious that our laws, our holidays, our tradition, our heritage are all rooted in Christianity. Well, to say that is to commit an ultimate heresy. As you say, I don't know the facts behind it completely. I don't know exactly what was verbatim said, but I do know that we have a selective blasphemy law in Britain where, the likes of gender ideology gets carte blanche to confuse children. But if you tell them that we're a Christian country, well, you really are guilty of Labour's Islamophobia law, Julia.
It really is mad. I say we are just maddened today, the lack of common sense. Darren Grimes, always good to talk to you. Plenty of common sense there. A former UK councillor, Darren Grimes. 10:49 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to talk about, a think tank that says, we're not just thinking there's two-tier policing in the protests in London, the UK capital. It's actually happening. And Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, should be stripped of the power to run the Metropolitan Police, the biggest police force in the country. That is up next. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:52 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about two-tier policing. Yeah, that old story keeps coming back, doesn't it? Well, it turns out it's not just a feeling. Not like, being a man or a woman on a given afternoon. It's actually real. A damning new report from the Policy Exchange think tank says that actually two-tier policing and protests in the London, in the UK capital, is not mere perception, but a reality in Britain's biggest force. Scotland Yard, they say, is prioritising the rights of demonstrators over ordinary public, failing to make arrests, treating some protest groups more leniently. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. May lead the public to believe the forces of law and order have lost control of the streets and yielded control to a mob. Yeah, pretty sure we do think that. And they say the Metropolitan Police, Britain's largest police force, should be put back into special measures due to its failure to handle protests properly, and crucially, that the London Mayor, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police, should be relieved of his duties in that area. Well, let's talk about this with Mike Neville. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning from Spain, Julia. Nice to see you.
Oh, it's all right for some. What's the weather like, my love?
Sunny and nice.
Right,
in the
sod
swimming
off.
pool with the sun on my back.
Sod off, Mike. It's absolutely grim here. Anyway, have a lovely time there the rest of the day. Very nice of you to spend the time with us today. Two-tier policing and protests, yes, it's what's happening, and Sadiq Khan is part of the problem, and he needs to not be in control of the Metropolitan Police. How much of that do you agree with?
All of it. I've read a lot of the report. If you look at that, what it says about the fear of the Jewish community, how those fears were simply ignored, that's one side of the thing. Then you had that UKIP march, which was supposed to happen in Whitechapel, which was immediately banned. So you just see the sort of thing that we've seen in the past with the different policing that you get for Black Lives Matter or Extinction Rebellion against, the Unite Britain, or how football fans are treated. So, and I do tend to agree that the Home Secretary used to be in charge of the Metropolitan Police. The Metropolitan Police has got such wide-ranging powers. They have they run the counter-terrorism for the country and the like. They really should be under the Home Secretary. This failed experiment with Sadiq Khan, and also the other thing is politics, of course, as well. Sadiq Khan has gone out of his way to say, right, we're going to stop or reduce stop and search significantly because that appeals to my voters. The consequences is that particularly more young black men get killed and stabbed.
Yeah, talk to the young black men's mothers, because the ones who either are stabbing or being stabbed, they want stop and search.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a massive increase in crime. The Met Police will say, of course, some of this crime was reduced. But when you look at the stats of, say, knife crime compared to Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, other major cities, London is far ahead. And some of the report goes on to say, for example, the Met are solving 1 out of 20 burglaries and robberies.
I'm amazed it's that high. I mean, they only go out to 1 in 20 robberies or burglaries. Generally, I don't think a week goes by in this office without someone coming in. They've done again, this week, who's had their phone stolen. Not 1 week. It's just the normal thing. And then when you find out, like, London's the phone theft capital. We're talking about £1,000 phones for phone theft capital of Europe. 1 in 20 robberies and burglaries solved. 1 in 13 shoplifting offences. Again, amazed it's that high. And 1 in 179
Julie, can I just say with that?
things.
Julie, with the shoplifting, we've got to clarify that because the vast majority of shopliftings are never reported.
Yeah, they don't bother.
Those 13 that are reported are where somebody's gone in there and I either nicked something really, really expensive or there's been some violence towards somebody. Most shopkeepers accept that somebody grabs hold of something and runs out. So those stats are highly dubious. Most people report robberies and burglaries. But can I say, Julie, the main problem here is a lack of focus in the sense that the police used to focus on catching criminals and preventing crime. And I always say I was proud to be a Scotland Yard detective, and there are many hard-working officers still trying to do these things. But what you have is, for the last 2 decades more, you've had a complete focus on diversity. We must have more female officers. We must have more black officers, all this sort of carry on. And what we were told, that this would improve trust and confidence in police. The reality is trust and confidence in the Metropolitan Police is at rock bottom. It's the lowest it's ever been, 46% or something like that. And so what you have is they've reduced their crime fighting abilities and focused on just recruiting by identity politics. And now we have a situation where crime is out of control and the public don't trust the police. What kind of nonsense is that? That is poor leadership and something.
And it is about the leadership. And again, I was more impressed with Sir Mark Rowley after Cressida Dick. She was, I mean, absolutely atrocious. But he's been in office for 3 years. He keeps turning up after every report and every failing and, saying, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to deal with it. But a lot of people don't really feel things are actually being dealt with. We've got, the report's entitled A Long, Long Way to Go. I would have added about another 14 longs in that. And this, and again, it's about, also, if you care about the economy, you need people to feel safe. You want people to feel this is a country they can come and live in, a city they can come and live in, and tourists want to come and visit and they feel safe, they're not worried. Because it certainly puts me off. I think, I want to go to a country and they go, well, it's high crime. I think, yeah, I won't go there. I'll go to a different country. It does put people off. And again, so many people are just afraid for their safety, afraid for their belongings, and just don't feel that, the police are on their side. They're too busy putting rainbow ribbon on, taking the knee to BLM, and being, and basically policing in no meaningful way, as in just walking along the side of, hate marches, which intimidate people. And of course, all with a big thumbs up from Sadiq Khan. Mike Neville, thank you so much for joining us. You get back to the sunshine in Spain, and we'll be thinking of you. Not. Tom Slater, listening to all of that. A lot of criticism of Sadiq Khan, but, the thing is, he's just not very good, is he?
Yes, I think you could boil down half of what's going wrong in London to that, and the other half to his terrible, terrible politics. When you've got someone who's so openly, this is a difficult question in general, is when you've got someone who's so openly partisan having to preside over protests, is that not always going to that's always going to mean an element of two-tierism, turning a blind eye to the actions of some, or coming down very hard on the actions of others.
Policing different kinds of protests so differently.
Exactly. So I think that's probably inevitable, given the politicised nature of having police and crime commissioners, and this slightly odd way in which in London it's obviously the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London kind of both sharing this role. Yeah. At the same time, and there's always going to be clashes, particularly at a time when you had Labour. Yeah, London, and it sets the tone for other,
because it's the biggest police force. It sets the tone for other police forces and what they do. And we're just saying, and again, the wokedom that has, and the influence of certain groups on politicians and on police chiefs around the country has been an ongoing issue. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and all of the stories we're talking about, because basically the whole show today is just, can we please have some common sense back and some rule of law? Call us old-fashioned. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, very big welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Very much appreciate you joining me. Lots to talk about at the home of common sense today. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, always great to have your company. If you miss anything from the show, we've had a right old rant in the last hour. Do take a look at my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, and hit subscribe so you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about just the abject failure of common sense over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years in this country, which has led us to a situation where we've got numerous cases, again and again, of asylum seekers being accused of or being convicted of and sentenced of horrific sex crimes against young women and girls. We're going to be talking about why on earth an employment tribunal involved in the Sandy Peggy case against NHS5 think that it is perfectly lawful, apparently, for a man who thinks he's a woman or claims to be a woman, if he does put on a dress and uses she and her instead of he and him, because incorrect pronouns apparently is the thing, and grows his hair long, apparently it's absolutely fine for him to go into a women's changing room until a woman complains. Why would a woman complain about a man being in a women's changing room? Well, because he's a man, mostly. We're going to talk about that case and also about the insanity of COVID returning. This, by the way, is why we needed a proper COVID inquiry. But schools have gone into lockdown. I kid you not. They've actually closed down because of a mutant strain of flu spreading through classrooms. Head teachers have ordered firebreak school closures. They've cancelled singing in assemblies. Lord have mercy on my soul. 3 schools shut for several days. Several others introduced measures to tackle the spread. And experts, in inverted commas, at the UK Health Security Agency have urged the public to consider wearing a mask if they have flu symptoms. They're not experts if they think a mask will help with flu symptoms. And by the way, if you've got flu symptoms, you're too ill to go to work at all. You should be in bed. Otherwise, you've got a cold. Get to work and stop whinging. Finished my say, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of the topics we're talking about today. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Joining me still today, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Thank you very much for joining us. Genuinely, I'm going to talk to Carl Hennigan to give a little bit. He's going to calm me down on the COVID thing. This is the reason why we needed a proper COVID inquiry, isn't it? To actually go, none of these things actually work. There's no evidence for a lot of the mad things, and that's why they weren't in the pandemic plan, whether it was flu or whether it was COVID or any other disease, it wasn't going to work, and therefore, or any other similar disease. And yet we've got health experts and teachers who haven't got a clue what they're doing, telling kids, you can't sing in assembly. Literally, the claim about singing comes from a completely and utterly debunked one-off, experiment or something, or a claim that it was kids singing in a choir that had spread the disease. This is insanity.
No, it's one of those things, isn't it, where people just caught the hypochondriac/authoritarian bug during lockdown, and they've struggled to shake it off.
And a mask looks like it should work, and therefore it must work.
No, exactly.
But it
makes
doesn't
sense,
work.
like a hair shirt or crucifix or something to ward off the devil. This is basically what we're talking about here. It's sort of superstition, really masquerading as science. In a way, I was, up until I saw this story, relatively encouraged that it felt like a lot of places had sort of shaken this off a little bit. You didn't really see too many people wandering around in those useless masks around this time of year. But it didn't take much to make them snap back into it, did it?
There have been at least 3 masks on my tube to and from work every day in the last couple of weeks. I have actually got a little bit of a cough at the moment, and I have to say I may or may not have coughed a little bit more because I'm a terrible human being. And I am. I'm sorry, but if you're that worried...
They got their masks on, so they'll be fine.
Well, exactly.
Bulletproof.
Exactly. Don't. It's so painful. Let's get back to more of the infuriating stories of the day. We've got 2 asylum seekers from Afghanistan, so illegal migrants who've arrived in this country, and they have been convicted and jailed yesterday for raping a schoolgirl, forcing her to commit oral sex on them. A traumatic experience, 15-year-old, her first sexual experience, said absolutely traumatised her, as you can imagine. These 2 young men, both 17, Jan, I'm assuming it's Jan Yahin Zab and Isra Niazab, both 17. They'd arrived just months earlier in small boats And because we are so insane in this country, we go, oh, they're children. Let us give them asylum and put them in a hotel or a house, paying for their rent and all their costs. And then on May the 10th, they assaulted the 15-year-old, dragged her, and she thankfully had her phone on and filmed a lot of it. She dragged her into a park and forced her to commit the sex act on them. She was shown in the video weeping, screaming help, begging not to be taken to the park. They had no doubt at all that what they were doing was not what she wanted. She wasn't willing, oh, I thought she was interested. The judge made it very clear that you knew. I accept you come from a place that has significant cultural differences from the UK. However, I don't accept that either of you does not understand the concept of consent. But then she says, you've betrayed the interests of those like you who come here fleeing harm and seeking safety, and for that you should feel a deep and lasting sense of shame. Bearing in mind that they came from France and paid people smugglers. And by the way, at 17, I'm sorry, you're basically a man in Afghanistan. Who are we kidding? Yeah. I mean, girls are married off at bloody 6, 8 years old in this country. They've thankfully been convicted. Thankfully, she had the video, and that would have helped convict. We've also now got another case. Now, this case there's a charge. It's going to appear in court this morning. This case has not come to court. People have a presumption of innocence. We need to stick to that. That is why we are a civilised country. Maybe it'll go to a jury. Yeah, we used to be a civilised country and allow juries for all these cases. But a man has been charged with the rape of 2 teenage girls in Bolton over the weekend. An Afghan national, Sultani Bakatash, 28 years old, charged with 2 counts of rape of a girl aged under 16, 1 count of sexual assault and another count of assault by penetration. He was arrested in the early hours of Sunday, remanded in custody. Now, what is interesting about this is that we know that this is an Afghan national. We don't know whether or not he's arrived here illegally or not. But the other case, the two 17-year-olds, the court had actually refused to allow them to be identified as Afghan nationals or as asylum seekers. The defence had actually said they didn't want anyone to know they were asylum seekers, but also said that if that video was shown of her attack, there would be, uproar on the streets. What does that tell us about the attitude these people have towards the general British public?
Well, I think they've got contempt for our safety and they've got contempt for our concerns, and that's what gets repeated time and time again. It's been obvious to anyone who's been paying attention that if you have a free-for-all at your border, if you basically turn a blind eye to illegal migration, that you're, particularly when it's coming from particular countries which have deeply misogynistic cultures. That's not to damn everyone coming from those countries, but if you read a report by Amnesty International or some preening human rights group, they would tell you about the way in which rape is not properly prosecuted.
Women aren't allowed out of the house. They're not allowed to speak or to sing.
You would read about women who are raped in a country like Afghanistan and then are punished for being so victimised that they are the subject of honour killings as a consequence of that. This is something that surely has to factor into our discussions, particularly when people are entering the country illegally. There's no checks whatsoever. Similarly, if you have illegal migration in general, it selects for people who are very likely, more likely than others, even of their fellow compatriots, to commit crimes. They may well be fleeing charges in France or Sweden or wherever, because we've seen that story repeated time and again.
Yeah, but also, why have those young men, you've got out of Afghanistan, I'm sorry, the women and girls are the people who most need to flee Afghanistan, and it's all young men.
Imagine if our conversation in this country was, say, in relation to Afghan refugees, was about women and children. It would be a very, very different conversation. We all know that's the case.
That said, I'm still not of the view that Britain has a duty of care to take half of the population of Afghanistan.
No, of course, but at the same time, I think if people, it's clear that the sort of form of asylum that we have has just become illegal migration for primarily young men. It's just it's
and
absurd.
When people say, well, you don't have safe and legal routes, these people, but other than the interpreters and people who claim to be interpreters, who just let in willy-nilly, as we've seen that problem there. But actually, if you had safe and legal routes, these men probably wouldn't get in. So they'd still be coming in by boats, and then we'd have all the other people.
Which is why you've got to stop the boats, coin of phrase. I mean, it's so obvious that if you
Why did no one think of that?
I know, exactly. It's a good slogan, isn't it? Someone could have cooked that up at some point in time.
I suppose you'd have to smash the gangs.
Now there's an idea. But it's one of those things, isn't it, where just on the question of the contempt for people's concerns as well, this level of official secrecy, which haunts the entire kind of Afghan asylum question because of the fact that when you had the pullout from Afghanistan and you had this secretive move to bring Afghans over here, that was completely covered up. You couldn't even report on it, even if you knew about it, until very recently. And now we see cases like this being covered up or not talked about under the aegis of sort of reporting restrictions, but it's so clear there is so much public interest in this now that is now breaking down.
But again, there's reporting
and
restrictions.
it's contempt for the public, though. It's not about contempt of court. It's we do not trust you to have this information, and that is
we'll all just go around beating up. But again, the anger after Southport was again that people thought they were being lied to.
Yeah.
That was what it was. I mean, again, and there was no excuse. I'm sorry. It was what happened in Southport was awful. There was not a single excuse for anybody to be on the streets with bricks attacking asylum hotels or threatening people or attacking the police. Not one. Not acceptable at all. But again, all right-minded people think that. But again, there also comes a point. And again, most of those people who were convicted of actual violence had records. Huge number of them. They had numerous convictions for assault, for goodness. They were wrong-uns who were just like fancied a ruck on the street, basically. Most of these people. They weren't, ordinary members of the public. But there comes a point when you push people so far, you lie to people so much, and people have had enough. And again, I'm so impressed with the Pink Ladies and their protests at the Epping Hotel that's going around the country. And also, again, this all makes it completely understandable when the thing that never happens keeps happening. Crowborough in East Sussex. This is residents of a small town. They've created what people are saying like vigilante groups. No, this is Community Watch. This is the community in action, basically in response to this Home Office plan, which they keep trying to stop. And there's legal threats, there's everything. They want to house over 500 legal migrants, almost entirely young single men, in a former army barracks. The army barracks has been used by cadets until a week ago. Now they're told, no, you can't use it. It's not safe for you. But apparently completely safe for these people. They're not going to be in the middle of nowhere. They're not going to be fenced in and unable to, they're going to be able to move completely freely. And it's right, literally, here's the town, it's right next to it. It's like a 10, 20-minute walk or something. And people basically, the dads, the husbands, the grandfathers, the right-minded men in the community and women are basically saying, we are going to be mounting patrols at school, coming in and going out hours. We're going to be mounting patrols in the evening. We're going to be making sure the bus stops are safe and outside schools are safe because of the concern. Why are they concerned? Are they just made it up in their head? Are they all just horrible, nasty racists and bigots? No, because this keeps happening. My guess is we don't know about most of the cases where this is happening because it's not being publicised unless we haven't got local papers sitting in every court anymore like we used to. When I was doing my local paper training, I sat in court every day. They're not doing that. They're not seeing the cases. So unless someone goes, oh, by the way, to the media, this case is coming up, you won't know the case has happened. You may not come to court. Most of these cases don't come to court, and you won't know that it was an asylum seeker or where they're from. So God knows this may be the tip of the iceberg.
No, exactly, and it's one of those things where if you looked at what the government was being briefed a little bit earlier this year, especially when all of the reporting about the Afghan resettlement process programme was finally coming to light, they know that some of the biggest kind of riot hotspots in the summer of 2024 were places which had quite a large amount of people who were coming from Afghanistan in particular, but also from illegal migration routes in general. So it's clear that this has been part of the kind of recipe for unrest. But I think what we've been seeing in Crowborough in relation to these patrols, what we've been seeing outside of the hotels, the Pink Ladies protests and so on, is that this year I think what we've seen is ordinary people really organising in a much more peaceful fashion. I think probably recoiling from what we saw in the summer of 2024 because no one supported that rioting beyond a few idiots. And there was obviously some quite clear-cut racism out on the streets. What has happened now is people say, well, unfortunately, we do have to take matters into our own hands because the state isn't protecting us. But we are doing so peacefully, we're doing so whilst oftentimes explicitly dismissing
no one has
racism,
a problem.
and that is something which I think is something we welcome.
Not in my street, by the way. There's a lot of big fancy houses, multi-million-pound houses. They've all got private security patrols, right? They've got a nice little man in his little car that looks a little bit like a police car from a distance, and he drives up and down those roads day and night. Okay, well, no one has a problem with that. This is no different, except they're protecting children and girls.
And they're not
women. They're not protecting big fancy houses from being
and there's the Crowborough group. There's also another group in Bournemouth, if I remember correctly, who've been doing something similar. You see reports of this sort of all over the country, in one way or another. And these people aren't walking around with bats and knives and things. They've got a walkie-talkie and a high-vis vest,
so they can contact each other and contact the police.
So, and what do you expect?
Yeah, I know, exactly. But again, it's just, here's an interesting thing. Kemi Badenoch yesterday, she's done her speech today. She's got busy. She got very busy as Kemi Badenoch. She done a speech this morning about welfare and the need to sort of tackle welfare benefits, the benefit reform. But yesterday there was a press conference about the grooming gangs inquiry. Basically, we waited. We were all far right for wanting a grooming gangs national inquiry led by a judge. That was you were far right for wanting that. Suddenly, the Prime Minister went all far right himself and agreed to do one. 6 months on, massive disputes between people trying to run the inquiry and many of the victims and survivors saying, we don't want it to be this person or that person. They don't want Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, involved, etc., etc. But yesterday, one of the things the jury said, they want this inquiry, they want it to be led by a judge. It could be a retired judge, so you can slow down. It doesn't have to take years. You put a 2-year time limit. Again, I think you always need to put a time limit on these things, and it needs to be very specific, and it needs to tackle the issues of, again, the religious and ethnic and national background of these men, largely Pakistani Muslim men from a very particular part of Pakistan, interestingly, and why they were targeting young, largely white girls, and how much that played a role not only in the choice of victim, but also in the failure of the authorities to act because worries about community cohesion, they claimed. But one of the things they've said is that, foreign sex offenders, many of these have dual nationality. Well, if you've got dual nationality, you're out. You're going back to Pakistan, but also that mosques would have to cooperate with grooming gangs inquiry, and just requiring, the key thing is it have to be a statutory inquiry so that people have to cooperate. And the reality is a lot of these inquiries, people don't cooperate.
No, exactly. You do have to compel them, particularly when there's potential evidence they're going to offer up is so damning either of themselves or of the institutions that they work with. The scale of this is so horrific. It has gone on for so many decades in this country that
still going on.
It's the combination of some kind of inquiry and some kind of beefed up criminal justice sort of task force to bring as many people to justice, not who simply were the perpetrators of this crime, but also people who covered it up and turned a blind eye in issues of public office, is absolutely necessary to kind of drain this poison out from our body politic. It is something which has absolutely poisoned people's relationship with the state, between different communities, if we're being perfectly frank, the way in which people felt like their concerns weren't being taken seriously.
They didn't feel it. No, they didn't feel it. They weren't. No, they weren't.
And they were quite clearly told that the rape of their own daughters, the rape of their own people within their community mattered less because of race relations, because of multiculturalism. This is actually a horrific state of affairs. Until this nettle is grasped, then it's impossible that we're going to be able to move on from this issue. But no one trusts the Labour government, who, let's be frank, was in charge in many of the areas in which this took place for a very long time. To deal with
the Tories had plenty of time to deal with it and didn't deal with it. That said, to be fair, Kemi Badenoch's been pretty sound on this one. But again, there's comes people still go, yeah, but you did have 14 years. But she's now announced a welfare review. And again, we need a lot of these reviews. The thing about all these things is nothing ever sort of well happens. That's the thing. Let me talk about the NHS case. There's actually 3 NHS stories actually in the news today. One is this doctors being urged to call off a strike that's coming up just before Christmas, as we've got this big flu bug doing the rounds. And flu is a dangerous disease. It kills people, and indeed, it kills a lot. A couple of years before COVID, it killed, I think, 10,000 plus people over winter. I mean, it's terrible. It's a terrible disease. Yeah, because viruses often kill people, and particularly in winter, largely older people, but also sick and frail younger people as well. But this at the same time has got these NHS maternity failings. This investigation by Baroness Amos, which is just initial findings, just 3 months into looking at maternity failings at 12 different NHS trusts, saying, basically women are being failed, babies are dying, women are suffering lifelong injuries because of poor care. I mean, again, tell us something we don't know. This abject failure of the NHS again and again and again, and nothing being done about it. And at the same time, but they're very, very, very concerned about so-called trans women, i.e. men who identify as women, put on a wig or grow their hair, put on some lipstick, and then say they want to stand in the changing room with women while they're getting out of their pants to change their clothes after a shift. No, I'm sorry. The NHS has completely lost its way. If you have anyone working in any unit, in any hospital in the country where babies are dying or women are getting bad care and lying in a pool of blood, with their dead baby and no one cares, with some of these things this report is suggesting, The fact that there's anyone working in the NHS that would allow that to happen, the fact that there's a boss of any unit or a chief executive that would allow that to happen and doesn't sort it out the next day, shows there is a rotten core to this. And yet they're obsessed with rainbow ribbons, net zero, diversity, equity, inclusion, all of that nonsense. And it's very, very important that a doctor who's a man, who calls himself Dr. Beth Upton, even though he's a man, should be allowed to stand in get changed and watch while other women who are nurses get changed, and it's not a problem. According to a tribunal yesterday, employment tribunal, they ruled that even despite the Supreme Court ruling that Sandy Peggy did not have a right to not have this man watching her because he wasn't just standing in the corner going, sorry to bother you, he was watching her, she says, that she didn't have a right for him not to be there, but she did have the right to complain. It was only once you complain that it becomes a problem. No, the women shouldn't have to complain. They should never have to confront a man in their women's changing room. That was always the law. It was always common sense. The Supreme Court clarified that in April. What the hell is this employment tribunal judge saying? Well, he did look like he was a woman. He doesn't. Can we put a picture up of Beth Upton? He doesn't look like he's a woman at all. He looks like a man trying to look like a woman.
This is what is so puzzling, to put it lightly, about the employment tribunal ruling, which people should know, it's 350 pages long, which implies that it's torturous and probably quite confused, is the idea that, yes, we have the Supreme Court ruling, which clarifies that under the Equality Act, sex means biological sex and so on and so forth. But at the same time, it wasn't necessarily unlawful for your man, Dr. Beth Upton, to be in the women's changing rooms until someone complains about it. And at that point, maybe some process has to take place. Maybe it's not necessarily unlawful because of the fact that he is wearing a dress and has grown his hair out.
But the judge actually said because he had a feminine appearance. And
on the question of what priorities, Fife NHS Trust and Dr. Beth Upton, who I understand have the same representation,
interestingly,
an inordinate amount of money has been spent fighting this case.
But our money.
And it's one of those things where if they'd have just said, you know what, particularly in light of the Supreme Court judgment, obviously this has been working its way through for some time, the Sandy Peggy case, but nevertheless...
It's, 2 years.
Let's just say the women's changing rooms are for women and get on with things, then they wouldn't have had to have spent all this time, public money...
But that's not inclusive, Tom.
Well,
no, you laugh, but that's what they think. Genuinely, his feelings that he thinks he's a woman, he knows he's not a woman because he must look down and see what he's got down there and knows he's a doctor. If he doesn't sodding well know he's a man, he shouldn't be practising as a doctor. That should be, seriously, doctoring 101. Is that a man or a woman? If you don't know the answer to that, I do not want you employed and I definitely don't want to be paying your wages. I consider that to be a really basic thing. But then you've got a judge in this tribunal using phrases like assigned female at birth. You're not assigned female at birth. When my daughter was born, they didn't go, well, what do you think? Should we let your baby decide when your baby's 6? Or should we just have a guess? Should we take a wild stab in the dark?
Or like the midwife just goes...
Has the baby got bean to veg? No, it's a girl. Yeah. It's really that simple.
It really is. But as we all know...
I feel strongly about this, you may have gathered.
It's just been captured. And also this idea about inclusivity. First of all, this inclusivity around gender is entirely exclusive of anyone who has even this tiny bit of common sense.
It's not very, it's not inclusive of women who don't want a man to watch them undress.
Single-sex spaces are exclusive by definition. That's the point of them. The idea being that, as we were talking about earlier, it's not to say that all men or all men who think they're women are necessarily a problem, although I think there's a bit of a higher problem when people are so keen to get into women's spaces. That should raise some alarm bells in some instances.
There's a lot on social media of men dressing up as if they're women. They might claim to be trans or think they're trans. I think they just get a kick out. Some of these men just get a kick out of wearing women's clothes, and they film themselves in women's bathrooms because they're getting a sexual kink out of it. I'm of the view that they are not safe to be in the same bathroom as me or any other women or girls.
They're exploiting a loophole which our derangement on the trans issue has gifted to them.
When we try to be kind to men who
It's not to say that, as we were talking about earlier, it's not to say that all men are sex offenders, to say that men shouldn't be in women's changing rooms because of the fact that in that moment you can't tell who is the wrong and who isn't. Similarly, with the whole a man who thinks he's a woman, it doesn't matter if has the best of intentions rather than being one of these fetishists who's just trying it. In that situation, you can't tell. There's a strength imbalance. There's also a question of dignity. This isn't just purely about safety. It's also about the fact that the women's toilets, women's changing rooms are reserved because of the fact that on that level of just having privacy, particularly at certain periods of life, that's quite important. We all knew this 5 minutes ago. Then we forgot it, started saying things like sex that was assigned at birth, regurgitating activist gobbledygook that, again, no one heard about until they were forced to sit down in some sort of training session which fed them all of this nonsense. And even now you've got tribunal judges who are bending over backwards to try and capitulate to this stuff. You would think after the Supreme Court ruling a lot of this would just fall back. It's quite clear now that the fight is only really
even
just beginning.
Even the government, even Parliament and the NHS, schools are still not obeying that law, and it's utterly infuriating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the stories we're talking about. Give us a call. Lots of messages coming in as well. 0344 499 1000. We are just having a general, everyone's gone mad and they need to stop being mad because they're putting people at risk, whether it's girls getting raped, whether it's women having to change with men watching them in their women's changing rooms, whether it's nutters putting on masks with the virus when the masks don't stop the virus, and it's well documented. I mean, you name it, we're talking about it today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, Talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Tom Slade from Spiked Online. We're going to get to your calls just a moment. Just some of your messages coming in on the trans ideology, mad, trans women who are men, not a risk to women in female changing rooms, is what the Employment Tribunal ruled in Sandy Peggy yesterday. Joe says this isn't something an employment tribunal should be deciding. Yeah, exactly. Anna says men shouldn't be anywhere near women's toilets. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a trans woman. Well, of course there isn't, my love. Ben says sanity must prevail before it's too late. Mendy says it's very clear that so many institutions and companies have already been captured by the woke. That particular example shows how women's rights to women-only spaces have been eroded and dismissed by woke employers. Samuel says the country needs to return back to a biology-based, reality-based, non-woke society. And Amy says this is absolutely ludicrous. I didn't think this country would become any more woke. And Suzanne says surely they're breaking the law. Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's fascinating. One of my former colleagues writing a book called, Woke is Dead. Yeah, you're just not paying attention, mate, if you think that. It really isn't. David is on the line. He's in Liverpool. David, what do you want to say?
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Hi, I just want to say the world's just gone absolutely crazy with this. It's got to the point where it's putting people at risk. Now, a study was done in 2017, which was published in 2018, and it was done by the prison service. And of 125 transgender prisoners, 60 of them were convicted for sexual offences. 27 of them were convicted for rape. Now, I don't know what a tribunal's business is on deciding this. I think it's an absolute farce. I think what needs to happen is to protect men, women and children. Is that you use the bathroom, that you are the gender to, not what you think you are, but what you are.
But we're often told, oh, but trans people are at risk. So a trans-identified man who calls himself a trans woman is at risk in a male bathroom because of male violence. You think, oh, well, but women aren't worried about male violence, but these men are uniquely not a risk to women. But the statistics suggest that's not the case.
And it's not the case. The problem is with this country, we're too focused on political correctness rather than the people now. It's gone absolutely mad. Political correctness needs to go where it belongs, in the bin. What's wrong with calling a spade a spade? Why are we having people stand around debating whether it's a shovel or a rake? You know, call a spade a spade. It is what it is. Like,
but also, a lot of this starts off with, I mean, and again, you know, people want, whether it's the trans thing or other issues, sort of the people wanting to be nice, people wanting to be kind, wanting to be welcoming and opening, and this awful word inclusive, which nearly always means excluding people who are common sense and calling it out. But it's just gone too far. And again, I you know, like I used to use preferred pronouns for I mean, I never didn't really come across many women who thought they were men, but the men who, you know, basically, you know, living as if they were women, I wanted to be kind and just, you know, respectful. But then it was like, oh no, and now a group of activists, not necessarily those people, activists, then demanding more and more and more of my rights as a woman. And it's like, well, no, okay, so then I'm not going to give you anything. I don't even do your pronouns anymore. I'm not playing anymore. I won't play.
Exactly, and it's got to the point where it's now infringing on women's rights. And how many years did women fight for women's rights?
Thank you.
Know,
oh no, we were given them. They were bestowed on us. You know what I mean? Women didn't have to, you know.
They were just bestowed, yes, even though women fought for hundreds of years to get women's rights and have it swiftly taken off the last couple of years due to political
You know, the thing is, the amount of times I've argued with politicians about this in the last few years, well, even going back 10 years, and they're going, this isn't an issue for voters. Well, Trump showed that cultural wars are an issue for voters, but also, crucially, like, oh, it's just some women who are bothered by this, you know. Well, actually, it's not just some women, but it's also not just women. It's men as well, like you, going, I mean, and Tom and so many others, you know, fighting on this issue, just going, no, it's just about reality. And when all of our public discourse and how people behave with each other at work or social media is based on lies, we're just refusing to play along anymore.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And the other thing is as well is I don't want to be in a male changing room as it is. I don't want anybody to see me, you know, let alone a woman that is pretending to be a man see me. You know,
I'm told in male change rooms there's a lot of men who kind of like leave it all open for quite a long time, unnecessarily so.
Yes, it does happen sometimes. But for me personally, I'm not one of those men. I'm quite a shy person when it comes to anything like that. I always have been. So it's not something that is
not for you. So you can completely understand why a woman wouldn't want it. Oh, David, great call. Thank you very much. Again, just Mr. Sensible, ordinary man. You know, just talking sense. What can I say? So much more to come. Lots more with Tom Slater as well. We're going to talk to the former NHS nurse and commentator at New Culture Forum, Amy Gallagher, about the latest madness on this NHS case, but also the puberty blocker trial, which is, we're told, still going ahead. More than 200 young children, some of the ages as young as 10 and 11. But increasing backlash of this, even including from some sensible Labour MPs. So are we going to be able to stop it? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:37 is the time. Just want to get you up to date with that case of the 15-year-old girl who was snatched from a park and raped by two teenage Afghan asylum seekers. They were yesterday jailed for about 10 years each. Of course, they won't serve 10 years. Let's not pretend that. But just some of the footage that was filmed by the 15-year-old girl, 3 minutes of footage when she was being dragged away. This is incredibly extraordinary. This is a new development. She had pleaded with passers-by for help as she was being dragged away, shouting, "You're going to rape me, leave me alone." And one woman in particular said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" She said, "No, I'm not. And then the woman didn't intervene any further. Now, maybe the woman was scared herself. I don't know how big these 17-year-olds are. Some 17-year-olds are, 6-foot lads, whether she felt it was safe or not to intervene. But either way, you can see a 15-year-old girl begging for help, and you're asking if she's okay, and she says no, and then not intervening, but other passers-by, she was crying for help and no one intervened. This is another thing that we need to talk about in this country. Tom Slater?
No, exactly. It's one of those things where, as you say, we don't know all of the details and we don't know what was going through that passerby's head when she came across this horrific scene.
Concerned enough to ask a girl if she's okay. She said she isn't.
Yeah. But this is something that you do see time and again. And
people being raped on tubes and no one saying anything.
I know, the kind of bystander phenomenon, which is really disconcerting. I mean, not as horrific as the crime itself, obviously. And you can understand why people do respond to things in different ways. But we should have a norm in this country or any civilised country where the compulsion is to act, even if you're not entirely sure, even if you are a little bit scared, because the costs are too great otherwise.
Exactly. Well, Amy Gallagher joins us now. She's a former NHS nurse and a commentator at the New Cultural Forum. Amy, I wanted to talk to you about a lot of the trans issues, but I'm wondering if you wanted to comment on that, because I think that whole case is horrific anyway. We import these people and then they completely abuse the hospitality. I think we've quite wrongly shown to them. They've been convicted and jailed. Yes, as I just, you did know what you were doing. But the fact that passers-by were aware of this girl screaming, it didn't help.
Yeah, I think it really shows that the kind of social contract of this country is breaking down, in that people just see themselves as kind of atomized individuals. And there's this particularly in London, I feel it, a kind of hostile, almost dog-eat-dog atmosphere where it's just,
not my problem. Not my problem.
Yeah, and it's a shame. And it never used to be like that. The change has happened so rapidly where people just think I'm just going to look after myself.
Yeah, she may not have felt safe, this woman, but again, if you don't feel safe, I'm guessing the 15-year-old being dragged by two 17-year-olds, I know I would have intervened, because I have intervened in cases where I felt that women are, and I've, literally tackled people on the tube when they're harassing a woman. And I'm just one of those people. I'm also luckily 5'11", and I've got a very good headmistressy manner, which can usually sort of stop a bloke in his tracks. But yeah, okay, dark street, you might be, but I don't know. I just can't imagine a scenario where I wouldn't have tried to do something.
Yeah, it seems remarkable that this woman obviously was noticed something was happening and asked, and then didn't do anything. So it was almost like, okay, there is something happening.
Are you okay? No. What, then you just walk away?
What then? Yeah, and to not have called anyone. I mean, gosh, no. I mean, as you said, we don't know the full details, but it does. I do think it speaks to something more broader that's happening in the country.
I absolutely think absolutely, it's stuff that you talk about often at the New Culture Forum. Let's talk about the general madness of the trans ideology. You've been a fantastic advocate on this. Of course, you used to work at the Tavistock Clinic. We'll get on to the puberty block of the trial in a moment. But this extraordinary case, the Sandy Peggy case, which an NHS nurse in Fife, she goes into the changing room, change her clothes, and she's taking off underwear, and there's a man in there. He may have called himself a woman, but he's not a woman, he's a man. Dr. Beth Upton. Apparently, he had feminine clothing, and he used feminine pronouns, and he had long hair, so apparently we're all supposed to pretend he's a woman. He's not a woman, he's a man. But he was in there. She asked him to leave. He accused her of bullying and harassment. She then was suspended by the NHS Trust. She took them to court over her treatment. 2 years this case has been going on. And yesterday there was a partial victory. Yes, she had been harassed by the NHS Trust, but an extraordinary ruling from the tribunal judge, who was a man, it must be noted, that she wasn't wrong for the Trust to allow a man to be in the changing rooms until she complained. And crucially, he said he'd taken into account the Supreme Court ruling in April, which made it very clear that single-sex spaces are only for that one sex, therefore. How on earth has this ruling happened when it's completely at odds with the Supreme Court ruling in April?
Yeah, I mean, this ruling kind of shows the limitations of the Supreme Court ruling and the fact that within the Equality Act, there is still this protected characteristic of gender reassignment. And the judge said he was trying to balance that with the protected characteristic of sex. The issue is that NHS 5 basically gave permission to Dr. Upton, the male doctor, who says he's a woman or female, to use the female changing room. In other words, they effectively rendered it a mixed changing
without telling the women.
So yeah, putting women at risk, obviously. But they are, they are allowed to do that. They are allowed to change the rules of what their own policy is, of course. And then when she complained, then it became an issue because then it's about her rights as a woman.
Yeah.
But what this does mean, I mean, we're waiting for the government guidance to come through about the Supreme Court ruling.
Well, this is the Equality and Human Rights Commission. They said, but the Baroness Faulkner, who's just left that job last week running that commission, she said that the government has had it for months. I mean, they've had it for months and months on end, and they're just sitting on it.
Yeah, because it's going to cause all sorts of problems. I mean, does this mean, I don't know. I mean, this is a 300-page long judgment, so it's going to take a long time for people to wade through it and understand it. But does this mean that every NHS hospital, if they want to have a single-sex changing room, they've got to explicitly kind of bar trans women? They've got to say trans women cannot use this single-sex space. It's single-sex only. Do they have to be very, very clear in that sense? Because what it means is that some NHS organisations that buy into gender ideology, they might say something's female, but do they mean female can mean a doctor like Dr. Upton, who's a man and says he's female? So yeah. It's still.
But again, we all thought that the Supreme Court. I remember on the day that Supreme Court judgment came out, the 4 Women Scotland case, that the definition of a woman was based on biological sex. And we're all cheering. It was a great case to have. But actually, it didn't. It hasn't changed everything. Loads of parts of the NHS, Parliament itself, government buildings, loads of places haven't actually changed any of their rules on this. Lots of schools haven't. They're all waiting for guidance. No, you don't need guidance. It's established the law. It's established the law was always that case. You've all misinterpreted the law all this time, and you need to stop doing it. Even, Labour parties agreed to their Labour Women's Conference. No, you're not in the main hall, or the speakers. No, you're not allowed to be a man. I don't care what you identify as. You're a man. You're not allowed to be it. So they've accepted it. And it's interesting. Some do, some don't. And yet everyone's sort of tiptoeing around this. But the law is very clear and explicit. And I don't understand how this judge can come to this, other than the fact that it's rather obvious where the judge lies, because he actually spoke at one point about being assigned female at birth. Once someone uses a phrase like that, they're captured.
Yeah, I mean, this ruling really does show that gender ideology is very much alive and well, not just in the NHS, but in the judiciary. As I said, the language, like you pointed out, was very in the style of gender ideology. There was one point that was made that it was quite plausible that this doctor had been, in quotes, living as a woman because he had a feminine manner, a feminine voice, and wore feminine makeup.
There you are.
Deeply offensive to women.
We're just a costume. There's men, and then there's thinking you're a woman and wearing the costume of being a woman, and that's what makes you a woman. We are simply figments of men's imagination.
Yeah, I mean, what about women that don't wear makeup or don't have a feminine sounding voice, whatever that is? So
Hello.
It's
No, but it's like Eddie Izzard, and I'm a girl when I wear heels, and I'm a boy when I wear flat shoes. When I'm at work, I've got my trainers on under the table. I'm a boy then.
And also quite astounding that it came up in the judgment that it was deemed that trans women, in other words, men, are at no greater risk to women in a change of biological women. And we know, I mean, I don't know how you get over the fact that pretty much all rapes and the vast majority of sexual assaults are committed by men against women.
Well, legally, in England, it's not possible to commit rape unless you're a man. But also, as one of our callers pointed out, and I've seen those stats, in terms of the representation of among trans-identified prisoners in prison, let's face it, a lot of them are just trying to get a better deal and get into women's prison when they could do that, although there are still some men in women's prisons pretending to be women. The rate of so-called trans identity among sex offenders way higher than among the ordinary prison population. I mean, I think that tells you everything. The reason why women don't want men in their changing rooms or their toilets is because they're men.
Yes, and as we know, for a lot of people,
that simple.
This is a sexual fetish for a lot of these men.
Yeah. I mean, there are men. I think we're all sympathetic to the men some men and some women believe quite wrongly, that they are born in the wrong body and they have what's called gender dysphoria. And people don't like this phrase, but it is a mental health issue because you're not born in the wrong body, but you think it's like, say, an anorexic thinks they're fat. They're not fat. They're very, very skinny. And someone thinks, and we should be sympathetic and respectful and kind and, but that doesn't mean you just then open it up to anyone who goes, I think I'll just put on a dress and some lipstick and I can go and watch women get in and out of their undies. Sorry, no.
And absolutely, and it also, I mean, this person, this Dr. Upton, had only been so-called identifying as a woman for not only a couple of years and hadn't gone through any kind of surgery.
As most of them haven't.
That would make any. No. I don't think it would make any difference personally, but it is important to make that point that it does seem that for a lot of these people, this idea that they're transitioning, it's quite a mild transition.
They put on a dress and grown their hair, and that's it. Everything else is intact. They are still. You want to cut your bits off. That's another conversation, but most of them haven't. But even if they haven't, or if they have, they're still a man. Can I ask you about the puberty blockers? Because you talked about this. You're very knowledgeable on this issue, having worked at the Tavistock, where they were just handing out these horrific, life-changing, body-changing drugs to young children like they were sweeties. We've still got Wes Street and the Health Secretary adamant they're going to go ahead with this NHS trial of more than 200 youngsters, and down to the age of 10 or 11, to give them puberty blockers. And we're told that we have to just prove whether or not puberty blockers can help kids or not. I mean, we know this is damaging physically healthy children's bodies. There's quite a backlash to this. There's talk about legal action. I know that you've been involved with James Esses and talking about this. He's been a fantastic campaigner on this issue. There's now Labour MPs who are getting in the act saying, this is not something we want to be doing. This is such an unethical trial. There is no upside to this. This is medically transforming the bodies of perfectly healthy children. Do you think there's any chance we can actually stop this horrific, frankly, Joseph Mengele-style trial going ahead?
I hope so. I do hope so. I feel very disappointed with Wes Streeting on this.
Yep.
He was changing his mind on these issues, but it seems actually as though he's gone backwards. We've already had a clinical trial. We've seen what it does. We've seen the harms that
thousands of children.
There wasn't any follow-ups for any of those children, but they're all still alive. Many of them you could still talk to. The issue is that this whole idea of puberty blockers, it's still predicated on this idea that you could be born in the wrong body.
Yeah.
It's almost as though there's some children that will be a kind of true transgender child and some that won't. And we need to kind of test how we treat this issue. I mean, the idea that it's going to be for children as young as 10 who are showing signs of gender incongruence, that's what it says. Yeah. They don't even need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Not that, for me, that wouldn't be okay anyway, but just they need to just show that there's an expressed interest in a kind of gender that's different to their sex. And then you're going to change their body straight away at age 10. I mean, it's obscene and it's totally unethical. And many of the side effects, like sterility, effects to sex drive, effects to bone density, these will only show up later in life. Yeah. And actually, this trial is going to be looking at the effects after 2 years only.
Yeah. So, it's not even a proper trial. There's no sort of control group or anything. And we'll talk about this hopefully with some time with Carl Hennigan as well, who was Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine. It is genuinely obscene. You keep up the fantastic work, and we can help you because I know this is, again, another common sense issue. Tom Slater?
Well, it's one of those reminders that the fight isn't over where any of this is concerned. With the puberty blockers, with Sandy Peggy in these tribunal cases, we can't just rely on top-down rulings to change what is basically a cultural problem within so many of our institutions. You sort that out and you prove that people's concerns aren't going away. That's when things
I still want a lot of people sacked. I really do. I'm sorry. I'm probably imprisoned. Right. Big thanks to Amy Gallagher there. Up next, going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from Professor Carl Hennigan as we get into lockdown and mask madness with a flu outbreak. But do either of those things work? I thought we knew the answer to that. Apparently not. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 11:54 is the time. Let's go straight to the next guest. Carl Hennigan is Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford and is joining us to talk about, lockdown and mask madness is back with a vengeance, Carl, but this time it's over flu. I thought we established that lockdowns and masks didn't actually work, but apparently they are back.
Yeah, so Julia, they are back. But let's be clear. First thing, flu. This is a term that is an all-catching term. So we have this thing about influenza versus flu. So if you look at the South Wales school, not only have they got influenza, RSV, they've also got viral gastroenteritis because they've got vomiting and diarrhea. So all of this is predictable, folks. It happens every winter. We get this predictable rise in acute respiratory infections, and what we've done is go into global panic and meltdown again.
Here we go.
The NHS has not prepared for this, and we're talking about 1,700 extra admissions in a population of 58 million. We're talking about...
Just get it in proportion.
A trust has to be prepared for winter for about 40, 50 extra cases to turn up. But to be honest here, it's a revolving door. We've got a new chief executive. NHS England is going to be defunct within a year. Yeah. These people have no idea. I want to tell you a story on the weekend. You know I work as an urgent care GP. Yeah. This is how bad it is. I go into the home. Somebody's seriously unwell. I can keep them in the home. I ring the crisis team. This is carers who are supposed to come out within 2 hours. Do you know what they said to us? We have no capacity. So a crisis team doesn't exist when we actually have a crisis.
That's literally what they're there for. And they're not
we have so many people in the back office scared, panicking, and nobody on the front line.
I was going to say the diversity officer and the net zero officer, they're on duty, they're fine. But this is the thing. So we've got schools there's one in South Wales, but other various schools closing down or banning children from singing in assembly. Again, that became one of the big things during COVID, wasn't it? You can't sing because apparently we'll all die. But also we've got these things. Experts, we're told, experts at the UK Health Security Agency urging people to consider wearing a mask if they have symptoms of flu. Well, the thing is, if you've got flu, frankly, I've had flu once in my life. I couldn't leave my bed, let alone, walk around on the pavement or get on a bus or a train. So that's a load of nonsense. If you're that ill, you should be at home anyway. But we've established beyond any reasonable doubt that the virus, the droplets of the virus, are a heck of a lot smaller than the actual holes in the mask, and they don't work. This is so well established. Why is a health agency putting this nonsense out?
Look, it is okay for people to do what they want to do, but for the UKHSA to provide advice which is not evidence-based is now unacceptable. And this is another organisation in the NHS that spends hundreds of millions of pounds that is dysfunctional and could disappear, and we would make no difference to what's going to happen.
We'd probably be safer. But again, OK, you're ill, you could probably infect a load of people, but wear a mask. Well, no, I've got elderly relatives in their 80s. I don't visit them when I had a rotten cold the last 2 weeks, and I said, look, I'm not going to visit you because I've got a really rotten cold and I don't want to give it to you because it might affect you even worse than it's affected me. I mean, that's just normal people, being sensible, isn't it? But I mean, in terms of, where we are, again, we've had a COVID inquiry, which we know is a load of nonsense. It's still ongoing, costing a fortune. And they seem to be looking at completely the wrong questions and certainly coming up with the wrong answers. And we discussed that recently, you and I. But this is why we need a proper COVID inquiry to actually establish that lockdowns don't work. That's why they were the opposite of the pandemic plan. Masks don't work. That's why they weren't advised at the beginning and not normally advised. I mean, but most of the lessons that seem to have been learnt from the COVID pandemic is the exact opposite of what is evidence-based.
So not only do they not work, we know that if you close schools, they're actually very harmful for children and their education.
Yep.
So actually you're creating harm.
Who knew? Who knew keeping kids at home for a year was going to be bad for them, eh?
The second issue here is we seem to now live in a world of fear and panic all the time.
Yeah.
You're from a generation in the 70s when we would turn up to school. If they tried to close the school, we'd have gone, well, where do we go now? My mum and dad are away. Nobody knows where we are. Different generation. But they're all linked, you see. If you understand why everybody has mental health problems, because all the time you're telling them there's around the corner, mutant strain, there's no NHS to protect you, then no wonder everybody is panicking and fearful. This is all connected. We've got the wrong people in the wrong jobs at the moment trying to help out and sort this system. It is completely failing. It's about time we had a change of tact. And please, West Streeting, not another review.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all hail Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. If only he was running the COVID inquiry, if only he was in charge of all these health security agencies who had been advising the health secretary, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in now. Lots more to talk about on this, including, oh, by the way, Navy chief warning that we can't basically keep ourselves safe. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It is 2 minutes past 12 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. We are the home of common sense here at Talk. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Delighted to say the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, is still with me as well. And Tom, I do want to talk to you about the conversation we just had with Carl Hennigan about COVID, but also breaking news that COVID fraud and error has cost UK taxpayers £10.9 billion, according to a new report by the COVID Counter Fraud Commissioner. I think that's wrong. I think it was way more than that. I mean, way more than that. We'll talk about that with you coming up. We're coming up in this hour. We are going to be talking to actually one of the members of the so-called vigilante group, I would say community watch group, who have been set up in the East Sussex town of Crowborough, as they are facing more than 500 illegal boat migrants who arrive and basically live at the edge of the town. A big concern for the safety of women and girls in the town. Not a surprise, given the spate of cases we have seen, not just cases where people are arrested, but convictions in recent months of men who've arrived, often from Afghanistan, it would appear, and Ethiopia and others seem to be a few of the countries that's been a big problem, where they have been convicted of sexual assaults and rapes of young girls. And we're going to be talking to one of the people who've set up, a community watch to basically try and keep those people safe. We're also going to talk about Australia, which, as of later today, UK time, is set to become the first country to implement a minimum age for social media use, with platforms like Instagram, TikTok and YouTube forced to block more than 1 million accounts. Marks the beginning of what many are thinking is going to be a global wave of regulation. But will it actually work? First up, though, let's talk about security, because we don't just have the issue of the Ukraine peace plan and Volodymyr Zelensky's meeting, of course, with the leaders of France, Germany and Britain in Downing Street yesterday. And Volodymyr Zelensky pointing out that Ukraine has no obligation to cede territory to Russia, and it would be unconstitutional and impossible to do so, as Donald Trump is pushing what is, let's face it, a surrender plan. The head of the Royal Navy has attacked the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, over her failure to fund defence of this country. The First Sea Lord, General Sir Gwyn Jenkins, has warned that Britain is on the brink of losing the North Atlantic to Russia, potentially allowing Putin to cut the UK off from its allies, destroy its undersea infrastructure of deep-sea energy and communication pipelines. And the Navy chief has pleaded for ministers to match the cash being spent by Britain's enemies before it is too late. Well, let's talk about that right now with my next guest. He's former head of the British Army and he's General Sir Peter Wall. A very good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Sir Peter. I mean, this is a stark warning. It's not the first stark warning from a military chief or a former military chief, and I'm guessing it's not going to be the last. Basically, despite all the talk about upping the percentage of our GDP we're going to spend on defence to meet NATO commitments and above, we actually are not doing enough, and the threat is growing. Do you agree with the First Sea Lord?
Yes, I do, and I agree with all the other people who've spoken out quite a bit in recent months and years. We've had a declining budget since the early days of the Conservative government post the financial crisis, and we seem to be overwhelmed by a sense of complacency. And I think we have a nation that thinks that our values and freedoms can be taken for granted. They're an entitlement rather than something that we all have a responsibility to promote and retain and
that we fought
respect.
for. They didn't just happen out of the blue. We fought for here, but also fought to protect them from, the threats we've had from abroad. It is interesting, isn't it, when you get the likes of Keir Starmer and indeed the German Chancellor and the French President meeting with Zelensky yesterday. They talk the talk. There's lots of hugs and shaking of hands and promises of doing what they can to help and talking about the threat of a war in Ukraine and how, Putin is a threat. And yet they don't appear to actually do very much about it.
Well, I'm not entirely convinced they completely get it. I think it's alien to their instincts and the reasons they came into politics. But I also recognise that we've got addicted to spending our peace dividend from the Cold War on welfare that's so politically hard to shift. And without a very clear plan, a very clear message and political courage, we're going to continue increasing more on welfare and less on defence.
Yeah.
And you talked earlier about, it will soon be too late. Arguably, it's already too late, because the time frame to invest properly in the right sort of industrial infrastructure, stocks, regrowth of all three armed services and re-equipment of them is quite a protracted period. We can't suddenly flick a switch and say we changed our mind.
OK, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, building fighter jets, even just building munitions factories. I know the government has talked about doing that. That's a good start. But, this, as you say, it's not even weeks or months. It is years and years. And we're up against enemies in Russia that have got an entirely sort of war-based economy right now. And you've got, of course, the longer time frame, perhaps, of China. They're spending a massive proportion of their national income on so-called defence. Many people fearing, the Taiwanese saying they are expecting an invasion by 2027. People are talking about, these are very real threats. Everyone's concerned that what's happening in Ukraine could happen in the Baltic states. Poland's taking it all very seriously. It does seem that everyone's sort of on the front line is taking it very seriously. And as you say, Western politicians suggest that they talk the talk. But what do you think can persuade them? Is it that actually the British public are going to have to persuade? Because so many people will get people calling in and texting in saying, "Oh, you're a warmonger, so is your guest. We don't want war, and we don't want to spend a load of money on military weapons that we may never use. We'd rather spend it on, building railway lines or welfare or tax cuts, or the NHS, whatever it is." What would you say to those people, Sir Peter?
Well, I think if you want to avoid war, you need to prepare for it. That's the paradox.
Yeah.
And this is not just about how much weaponry and stocks can we accrue and how quickly. It's essentially about the messages we are sending to our enemies and potential enemies in terms of our mindset.
Yeah.
And the mindset is lacking, as you've identified. So we talk a good game, but beneath that, there's no substance or very little substance. And, our service chiefs are effectively muzzled nowadays. They don't get out much and they're not allowed to say very much in public. So the political class has complete control of the message, and the country is being deprived of the understanding of the degree of risk, I think.
But we're constantly told, I see headlines all the time, and we discuss it on the show all the time about the risk. And we had talk about, you've had John Healey, the Defence Secretary, giving a press conference at Downing Street very seriously, very military-like, talking about the threat of this Russian submarine that had been basically mapping our underwater cables and the like, and then putting a laser beam into the eyes of the jet fighter pilots who were sort of looking, watching what they were doing. But there's no reason for Russia to be mapping our underwater cables, whether they are for gas or electricity or for communications, unless they plan to use that information against us at some point. But we seem to just go, "Oh, don't do that again, Russia, because we'll be cross with you if you do." But we don't do anything about it.
Well, I think it was Churchill who said at the end of the Second World War that the thing about the Russians is they'll go into your house and they'll try every door. And if they can get through the door, they'll then go and exploit the opportunity. And we see a bit of that going on in this underwater cable thing. They're not going to do anything imminently, probably. They might be, who knows, but they're probably not. What they are doing is testing our resolve. And is it just rhetoric, or do we actually do something about it? And at the moment, it's rhetoric. Although what the Defence Secretary said is, on this particular issue, which of course goes right to the heart of the way the country functions, the way the internet operates, the way the NHS does its business, and the banking system. It absolutely is the Achilles heel of what goes on in the economy. Is that we will defend, we will deter, and we will defeat, which is exactly the right terminology. That's the Cold War terminology. At last, people are using the right set of words, but we now need to see the machinery and the willpower to go and draw some red lines, and as soon as people cross them, do something suitably aggressive to stop them.
Yeah, and that's it. The ability and the will to use that ability. We've got a £60 billion defence budget at the current time. Again, it's still under 3% of the of our GDP at the current time. What should it be? What should we be spending?
Well, considerably more is the answer. I can't give you a number because I'm not close enough to the detail. But
when you say considerably more, 70 billion or 140 billion?
Well, I would have, so basically, there's a pledge to spend 3.5% by 2030.
But that's nothing.
In the current time frame, that's effectively never. I would have thought something, the longer we leave it, the more it's going to be. Something that points towards 4% might cover it. I don't know. It depends what the current chiefs are thinking, where the real detail lies in the recent defence review, which we haven't all seen all of that. It also is a function of the costs of re-establishing an industrial base, the level of inflation in defence, which tends to be higher than in the normal economy. But it's a quantum above what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
Even starting to increase that will demonstrate the mindset shift we've talked about.
Yeah, and it's really important that we do that. And again, if we're not willing to even protect our own waters and our own cables and make it that clear to Russia, no wonder they think, well, they thought we could just go into Ukraine. No wonder they think that the Baltics are going to be up for grabs as well. In terms of Ukraine, we've had all these peace talks. I mean, it's non-stop, isn't it? Yet another talk, group of talks, whether it's Witkoff in Moscow, whether it's, Zelensky coming to the UK or meetings in Brussels, lots and lots of talk. We've got various different peace plans on the table. Some of them are surrender plans, which Russia and America seems like, some of which are attempts to actually at least broker some sort of ceasefire from Europe. But I mean, is Europe and UK among Europeans, are we in a position to in any way enforce any deal that we would deem acceptable and the Ukrainians would deem acceptable? Or are we actually at the mercy of the US? Because not only are they the only people who can actually, can stand up to Russia at the current time, but also they're the only ones who've got the sort of military capability to even send, even if we're paying for it, to send weapons to Ukraine.
I think the military capability to interpose a European force between the Ukrainians and the Russians in wherever the kind of line is drawn is limited, and it would need to be sustained probably almost indefinitely in the current mentality of all the players.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very difficult issue to resolve, because everybody wants the fighting to stop, but no one wants to do it on the terms that Putin will set.
Yeah.
He, for the time being, can continue the fight. He's not losing it, but neither is he winning it, and he can withstand the political pain and the moral pain at home, because that's what the Russians do. And unfortunately, all the parties have a different vision for what this might look like and how it could be conducted and who pays for it and what happens about the reconstruction of Ukraine. And until there's a genuinely common rationale, then there is not going to be peace. And, the Americans and the Europeans might, in one scenario, have been aligned, but they're certainly not now.
No.
And the Russians for themselves are only going to accept something that rewards the aggression they showed in 2022,
they want to win.
Which is completely alien to our upbringing and our thinking.
Yeah, indeed. Just finally, but it's a really simple question after what the First Sea Lord, the head of the Navy, has said, and what you've just been saying now. I mean, are we safe?
No, we're not safe.
It's really simple.
We're not suddenly going to have lots of green men at Dover invading our landscape, but we are certainly being tested every day in terms of cyber attacks, all sorts of other subversive activities, of which the thing you talked about with the Russian frigate is one of the more visible ones. Still pretty unattractive, but at least we can see it's happening. And so, frankly, not being close to the security world as I used to be, it's difficult to know where the cursor sits, but we're certainly not safe, no. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if we were.
No, very, very true. Well, on that happy note, General Sir Peter War, I so appreciate you joining us and you're being so candid as well. Former head of the British Army, very much agreeing with the current head of the Navy has said in terms of the need for defence cash and just getting on with it and reality check. Listening to all of that, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. A little bit worrying. I always hope when I ask those questions, they're going to go, no, it's all fine. No, we're not. I mean, these are serious people, right? They're serious people. They get it.
No, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things which has been, brought into sharp relief by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is that Europe, partly because it had this kind of idea that conflict was the sort of thing of the past, it was a thing of the 20th century, it will be something that would be in faraway lands, a kind of foreign policy choice rather than something that might be on our doorstep. But also because of the fact that, quite frankly, under the NATO framework, people become reliant on American cover for things like this. And so when you've got Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and the rest of the European leaders running around doing press conferences, talking about a coalition of the willing.
Lots of hugging.
Lots of hugging, lots of statements. It's a coalition of the weak. They know they can't even defend their own borders, let alone the borders of Ukraine. So
but they're not getting on. I can
else.
understand the whole guys, wake up. But again, why didn't you wake up when he actually invaded? Why didn't you wake up when he said he was going to invade? I don't understand. Why is everyone surprised when someone does exactly what they say they're going to do? The clue might have been the 120,000 troops and the tanks on the border. I don't know. I would take that as a clue. I'm old-fashioned like that. I'm fact-based in my thinking. But the fact that that's happened and there's been no upscale even all that time, and yes, I know we've had lots of other problems going on, yada yada, but tough. That tough. There's stuff you have to do when you run when you're in charge. But every single government in Europe. I mean, Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, he's turned out to be very sane on migration, on net zero, on security. Thank God we've got a sane person leading Germany, because we haven't had that for quite a few years. He seems to be, he's talking the right talk, whether he actually delivers. But we're talking about, and again, people say, well, the voters don't want it. You know what the voters are going to be really unhappy about is when we actually do have to go to war, or when we have a cyber attack which completely disables our entire banking system or the NHS or anything else, and our entire economy collapses. I'm sorry, they might be angry about that. And if these leaders all literally went to their people, right, no one wants to spend money on this stuff because we don't want to ever have to use it, but we are going to have to. And I'm sorry, Russia, we're not going to invade you, we're not going to do anything, but you literally one step further and that's it. We are at war with you because you've got to stop. You have to stand up to bullies, whether it's a playground bully, whether it's an international bully, you have to stand up to bullies. And I think that the British people, the French people, the German people, everything, I think they would understand it if it was explained to them in those terms. And when someone as serious as General Sir Peter Wool says, we're not safe, I'm sorry, we should be listening.
Of course, it's just a matter of national defence, defending your own borders as much as it is anything else. And it's one of those... look at what European leaders do, not what they say. They said we stand with Ukraine, okay, but they've given more money to the Russian war machine in the form of paying for Russian fossil fuels over the course of the past few years than they have in direct military and financial aid to Ukraine. They say that we want to potentially help secure this peace in the longer term. And yet what that really seems to mean is please, 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 Donald Trump, do come in and back us up. Otherwise we can't do it, because they can't do it, because they do not have the defence spending.
But they've done nothing. It's not like we're building it up and we're hoping in a couple of years we can just keep America in until we can... No, we're not doing anything.
This is why when people say, oh, Donald Trump has thrown Ukraine under the bus, and obviously he is under the influence of a lot of people who frankly have a utterly warped idea of this conflict and think that Ukraine were the aggressors almost because of the funhouse mirrors way in which they view this particular war. At the same time, at the very least, there's an honesty to the position that he has taken, which is it's none of our business, it's not our problem, and that's regrettable. At the same time, you've got European leaders who have been talking out both sides of their mouth this entire time, and they need a lot more scrutiny.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. We're going to go to a quick break, but I do want to get your thoughts on whether this COVID fraud and error costing UK taxpayers almost 11 billion quid. Breaking news in the last half an hour. I think it's way more than that, but also we were discussing with Carl Hennigan earlier, these schools going into lockdown and people, medical experts apparently saying we should wear masks when there's simply no evidence for any of this stuff actually working. Nothing has been learned. And when people like me bang on about how we need to have a proper COVID inquiry about the lessons of lockdown, it's because if you don't learn the right lessons, you do the same stupid stuff again, which is exactly what's happening. 12:21 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk. Tom Slater still with me, he's editor of Spiked Online. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer as well. Yeah, well, you already knew all that bit, didn't you? I didn't get a chance to talk to you after we spoke to Carl Hennigan about schools going into lockdown, various schools, and some of them had fire break school closures. I mean, literally, guys, we did this in 20 and 21. It didn't work. And all those people who said, do you remember COVID, the amount of deaths we were going to have in early 2022 if we didn't go to lockdown in 2021? And then basically, Boris wasn't talked out of it. It was just backbenchers, the Steve Bakers, everyone went, basically, we're going to oust you. There's going to be a leadership election if you put us into lockdown again, because it's insane. And then we didn't see a massive outbreak. Oh, no. So what? So we've proved that they don't make a difference? Oh, no. God forbid. We are learning literally the opposite of the right lessons from the COVID inquiry. Every report from it's just, it's mind-blowing.
Well, they'd
how
made their mind
bad,
up already when they went into that, didn't they?
They absolutely, The question is only going to be how many lockdowns should we have had more, and how longer and how much sooner should they have been? And the fact they were going, based on computer models, which we know were completely wrong by a number of magnitudes, the loads more, 23,000 people would have died. And here we are, we've got the UK Health Security Agency telling people, you should think about wearing masks. The flu virus, I believe, is around the same size as the COVID virus, I think. Literally, those blue masks, it's 500 times smaller than the holes in the mask. Not those big ones at the side or by your nose, the actual holes in the material. It doesn't work, unless it might stop like a spray of guns from your nose, but that's not how the flu virus spreads. And yet that's what they're advising. And these are the people who are going to be in charge if we have another pandemic. This is terrifying.
No, absolutely. It's just theatre and ritual rather than science. And we certainly saw that during the pandemic, didn't we, where you had the medical advice and the expert advice just completely turn on a dime, seemingly because of political pressure, because they got a bit spooked, because other countries were doing other things, and there was a hysteria in the media and elsewhere which led them to do that. And I think it was an eye-opening moment for a lot of us. Not that everyone in journalism, and certainly not ourselves, were completely just given to listening to experts and thinking that they had to hold forth.
You guys were ahead of me. You and Brendan O'Neill were ahead of me on this one.
It was pretty shocking the way in which, as I say, you kind of saw behind the curtain a little bit. You saw that whilst often the expertise is presented to us as entirely inviolable, it's 100% objective, these people, especially when they're brought into politics, are subject to all of the kind of political
and they're
influences
still lying
as much
now.
as anyone else. And of course, it's their reputations on the line. And so it's one of those things that even the experts are human beings as well. There's all sorts of perverse incentives, and we saw that during the pandemic, and now we can't unsee it. So when you see things like this, it's particularly ridiculous.
I know, and then we've got we can't unsee it, but it seems like a majority of the population think that lockdowns and masks are the answer. No, that's the terrible thing, because they've been lied to, and there's no incentive for any of the politicians, or the medics, or the scientists, or the media, who, in my view, were criminally negligent. Most of the media. We were the only broadcaster at that time, the only broadcaster that was actually calling this out. And again, thanks to influence Spiked Online and others, and Toby Young and others who were calling this out earlier. But the obsession everyone has with COVID fraud and error, and Miss Bra, or whatever her name is,
Michelle Mone.
Michelle Mone and things like that. What these people did was awful, but they reckon almost £11 billion of COVID fraud and error costing taxpayers. 11 billion quid at the COVID counter fraud commissioner. Way more than that. But also, don't get worried about 11 billion quid. Yeah. You should be worried about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds of government debt that we've got to fund shutting down our economy and all the damage to our kids since, the damage to our schools, the damage to our NHS, the damage to everything since. And there are, every single time you're worried about your taxes going up and public services not working, everything, and all the, the NHS problems, all that. That's all due to lockdown, right? It's all due to lockdown. So, sod 11 billion quid, we'd have been lucky to get away with an 11 billion quid cost. Add 2 zeros to that, guys,
And especially a lot of the money that was sprayed at various businesses to try and keep them going. Of course, there was always going to be... The government had to accept that there was going to be a level of fraud there, otherwise they wouldn't be able to do these
But they should have said, when we investigate later, you're going to prison for 10 years.
Oh, no, I completely agree. They really mishandled it. But the thing is like these policies were largely in place to smooth the enormous economic damage to some extent that was done by their own lockdown policies.
Time.
So it's one of those things where, as you say, we've got to look at what is the source of the problem here, and it's that we reacted to a pandemic by shutting down the economy, trying to turn it off and on like a blow heater, thinking that would work.
Who knew?
Whilst printing a ton of money.
It's almost like there was a pandemic plan that had specifically ruled out lockdowns because of the extra long-term cost that would cost more lives in the long run. It's almost like there was a to this day, and forever.
It's like there's trade-offs and things.
Yeah, and if I see one more BBC report going, it turns out all these kids have been damaged by being at home from school for all this time. No beep Sherlock, And by the way, one of the people who exposed an awful lot of the madness of what was going on by exposing Matt Hancock's WhatsApps was Isabel Oakeshott of This Parish, our international editor. Now, on Wednesday night, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Talk's going to bring you never-seen-before undercover footage from inside the world's most dangerous migrant camps in Calais, where gunfire is a nightly reality. Plus, extraordinary new evidence showing French police escorting migrants on public transport all the way to the beaches, doing nothing to stop the crossings. Isabel Oakeshott presents The Undercover Migrant. It's tomorrow night at 7 p.m. only on Talk. You don't want to miss that. We're going to talk to Isabel on the show tomorrow to talk a bit more detail about that. But what she did to get that undercover footage is this is amazing new stuff, incredibly dangerous. And again, she is a seriously good exposer of wrongdoing, and she's certainly done that here. Let's go to a couple of your calls very quickly. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's talk to Tarquin, who's in London. Tarquin, you want to talk about what our former general had to say about basically we are simply not safe in this country.
Yeah, and I want to get your input on this, Julia. I was on YouTube doing a bit of research on this same subject that happened yesterday, and it seems that the recruitment into the British Army last year was 278 boys. That's all. They got 27. Now, that's not even one infantry unit. Therefore, and you know what I'm thinking, therefore, how would we fight that? We haven't got the manpower coming in. Can you say that word anywhere? Woman power, person power?
No, we mostly need men, not that toxic masculinity. We mostly need that for war.
Yeah, it's all bought. It's one. No, can I quote you on that? No beep, Sherlock. Exactly. I love that.
I had to edit myself. No, but this is a real issue. I mean, you look at people, like when Finland joined NATO, and people go, we've got to look after NATO now. Are you kidding me? They've got 250,000 reservists. They've got a population half the size of London, and they've got more reservists, fully trained, and more weaponry than our entire army.
We're in a pickle because even if we raise GDP to 3.5% of GDP for the defence budget, I can just see all this masses of defence contractors rubbing their hands. Look at all these. And then, meanwhile, there's nobody to get into them. And there was some trouble recently, wasn't there? You probably know this better than me. Of them making high-pitched frequencies, making all the soldiers ill that manned them. There's all sorts of issues. The actual day-to-day running.
We haven't got enough. We haven't got enough personnel. We haven't got enough munitions. We haven't got enough of anything. Forget the 3.5% of GDP. I mean, we need to be upping it to about 5%, and we need to be doing it today, and we need to be buying shop-bought, literally off-the-shelf stuff from the top military suppliers in the world. Well, ideally, if it's made in Britain, I think we need to be on a war footing. I think we're in the late 1930s, and I think people are kidding themselves they're anywhere else. And the only way to stop war, as every single military expert will tell you, is to be prepared, willing, and able to fight a war. That's the only thing that prevents a war from happening.
Hear, hear, madam. Hear,
Well, there
hear.
we are. Darwin, we end in a note of agreement. Thank you very much. Let's go to Louise, who is in Kent. Louise, you want to talk about a subject we talked about a lot today, and this is trans people, but this idea that there are trans kids, which there aren't, and the puberty blocker trial.
The first thing I was going to say, Julia, is listening to the news. The bit that fills me with horror that they're just not learning about is do X, Y, Z to stop the spread.
Don't. This is in terms of the flu bug.
When I hear that words, stop the spread. Which
You can't
is all we
stop
heard
the spread.
In COVID.
Yeah.
You cannot stop the spread. Learn that one, and you're getting somewhere right.
I thought they were supposed to do that on day one of medical school, but apparently not.
Well, no. But that, brings us on to the trans thing, because what I think is really interesting about this, will the government now put their report out, bearing in mind what's happened in Scotland, and water down their report? That's what worries me.
What do you mean? On the blockchain.
They've wasted time putting this guidance out.
Yeah, well, they've got guidance. They haven't published it.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Is that because they're now rapidly altering it in light of Scotland that actually, no, men in women's changing rooms offer no risk?
Yeah.
That's what worries me. Right, so there's that bit. But with the puberty blocker trial, now, this might be quite interesting because let's think about intersex children. Now, they're very rare. They are very rare.
Yeah.
And it's very much when the doctors, when they try to observe the sex, not assign it, observe it, because that's the English language.
Yeah.
Observe is what you see. Assign is what you choose, right? So when you observe the sex, the doctors can't with these easily. So they make the best decision at the time with the parents, etc. So what's happened recently, of course, these youngsters have grown up and said, oh, my parent got it wrong. I'm angry, suing them or whatever. Now, with this trans puberty blocker thing, the children, if they're as young as 8, won't be able to give consent. It'll be the parents that do it, and I suspect that even something like Gillick competency wouldn't be able to be applied.
Victoria Gate, it was about getting the pill, wasn't it? But this is the thing, and that's been an issue because we've seen kids as long as 10 getting these puberty blockers, and the trial is going to involve kids as young as 10, 11. But often it's with the parents' consent, and again, because the parents are saying, well, there's two sets. There's desperate, worried parents who've got a kid who's threatening suicide, and they've been told the lie that is your child's more likely to commit suicide if they don't go on this treatment. That's a lie. And the other lot is, frankly, a load of parents who are completely signed up to this madness and are pushing their kids. Because I think that having a trans kid to some people is like having the latest handbag, which is why this is a massive issue in posh London schools, a massive issue in New York and in California, but not really anywhere else.
With the Gillick competency, because that was also applied to children at end-of-life care, things like that. Yeah. Because they can make those rational decisions about those specific things. Now, a child of 8 cannot make a rational decision about his future life with puberty blockers. So,
or fertility and everything like that, yeah.
So the parent might agree, and then what happens, the child gets to 21, finds they're infertile, and then lines up like Kiribel, and then wants to sue the parents. They're opening a flipping minefield with all this.
Oh, they are. I've no doubt at all there are going to be lawsuits coming out of people's ears, in the years to come over this. I think it's an absolutely shocking thing. And certainly it's legally untenable. It's against the Hippocratic Oath for them to conduct these experiments on children. And everyone needs to stop lying. And when a child says, I think I'm born in the wrong body, well, you aren't, darling. But feel free to wear a dress or wear whatever it is you want. If you think you're a boy, whatever, that's fine. And you can play with whatever toys you want. There isn't anything like that. We don't live in the 1950s anymore, but you aren't born in the wrong body because that's impossible and no one is. And it should be really, really that simple. Louise, thank you for that call. 12:36 is the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to then talk about, people talk about a vigilante group. This is just Community Watch. This is just good citizens trying to protect their vulnerable members of society, girls, young children, women, from, basically the arrival of some 500 undocumented males from another country who've entered the country illegally, being put in a camp right next to their home. We're going to be talking to the founder of the Crowborough Patrol up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Coming up, we're going to talk about that Australia social media ban for under 16s. Comes into force later today, our time here in the UK. But will it actually work? And what are the implications for it? For everyone else. You may not want your 15-year-old to be on social media, but what does it mean for our freedoms? We'll talk about all of that coming up. But right now, let's talk about the freedom of, illegal migrants to basically wander freely around our towns and cities, because that's what's been happening. Tens of thousands of young men, largely young men of fighting age, arriving in this country from countries which are, let's face it, largely very different culturally from our country. So their attitudes to women and girls appear to be very different, certainly from the spate of cases we have seen in recent months, not even just recent months, just in the last 24 hours of people who've arrived from countries like asylum, like Afghanistan, sought asylum, come to this country, and then within months raped young teenage girls, being convicted, sentenced, but have come here, and been looked after by this country. Not a surprise then that the people of Crowborough in East Sussex have mounted a campaign to stop more than 500 of such migrants to arrive at a local military camp. And they have decided, with numerous legal challenges and speaking in the media, that they are going to have to set up what some people are calling a vigilante group. I think it's a community watch group of concerned people. But let's talk about this with the founder of what they're calling Crowborough Patrol, Nick Jones, who joins us now. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Afternoon, apologies. Afternoon to you.
Afternoon,
I have to say, it's interesting, even though the headline would say like a vigilante patrol. But these people haven't arrived yet, these young men, but we know they are arriving. Local cadets, only a week ago, teenage cadets were using this military camp. MOD said you can no longer use it when these men are here because it will be unsafe. But apparently not unsafe for these young men to wander freely around the town and to be able to, let's face it, perhaps pose a risk. We don't know, but perhaps pose a risk to particularly young girls and young women in your town. Tell us first, who came up with this idea of having a patrol and what is it going to involve?
Right. So how it started was I was chatting to a neighbour who I know from dog walking, and she was telling me she's got a horse. And she goes off and feeds her horse at 5:30 in the morning in the dark on her own. She said, I'm going to be scared stiff going down there on my own, near the army camp, feeding this horse. And she said, then I'm scared to leave my kids. I'm going to be scared to leave my kids at home. If my husband's not there, who's going to be calling, who's going to be knocking on the door? Yeah. And I said, look, Sam, I said, just take my phone number. I'm around the corner. If any problem, just shout. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to get a few more fellas on board with this, so we can help some people. And it's just grown from a little WhatsApp group into a patrol. So we've now got 41 members of men in the town, and lots of people in line waiting to come on board. We're getting DBS checks done before they can come on.
Yeah.
So I can see this growing to, a few hundred in a few weeks, the way it's, I'm adding people all the time.
But again, people are genuinely concerned, because this is the thing. When people talked about we don't want to have asylum seekers, we had these protests oh my gosh, where were they supposed to be? Epping, at the Bella Hotel, after a girl was sexually assaulted, and that man has now been arrested, jailed, freed on manhunt, and now actually deported back to Ethiopia. But when people say we don't want people, asylum seekers, undocumented men, we don't know who they are, unvetted, living in local hotels, the government's going, we're going to put them in like local housing. Yeah, well, we don't want them there either. And then there was talk about putting them in military camps. But I think a lot of us were expecting, a military camp that with fencing around it, sealed in, so that these men were not free on our streets. No, they put them into, planning to put them into places like Crowborough, which is, it's quite literally on the edge of the town. It's a short walk or bus ride.
500 yards.
500 yards.
Song. I don't know if you heard the song that someone wrote for us.
Is it clean? Don't get me in trouble.
It's very good. It's actually, he's used AI to produce it. It sounds professional. It's amazing. To be honest, it brought tears to my eyes. He watched me do an interview with David Curtin from the Heritage Party.
Yeah.
And he based this song around that interview and some of the things I'd said in
Is it I would walk 500 yards?
No, it's called 500 Yards from Home, Crowborough Rising.
Right.
Look,
Look
look it up on YouTube.
Oh, I'll
It's
look it up. I'll
actually
look it up.
amazing.
But this is the thing. I mean, these young men, we don't know where they're from. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their background is. And we have seen this spate of cases. It's only today, the news today, we've got 2 young 17-year-olds from Afghanistan who've been jailed for around 10 years each for raping a 15-year-old girl, already raping her. We've got another young man accused of a double rape, again accused. That case has not come to court, presumption of innocence. We need to have the proper system here. But of 2 under 16-year-olds. These things that never happen do seem to keep on happening, don't they?
It's completely insane. They shouldn't be here in the first place. This is obviously part of an agenda. We can see that they're being pushed across the channel. They're not. A lot of them aren't even using boats now. I was watching a video this morning. There's just streams of them coming off of a ferry.
Yeah.
It's just like why are the government doing that? Because they're obviously facilitating it. And it's obviously to stir us up, try and cause civil unrest so they can bring in digital IDs.
So you're that now. Lots of people say that's a full-on conspiracy theory.
Well,
genuinely, I need to. Nick, I can't tell you.
Obvious.
I can't tell you. I've met these people. They're not competent enough to have a conspiracy. I can tell you that. They're utterly useless.
Well, you can say that, but I'm sure this is a very deep agenda.
Well, I think there is.
Forget all the conspiracies.
Yeah.
Just there is something very, very wrong.
I think they definitely don't think it's an issue having a load of people here from. There's that whole woke agenda of just like, diversity is our strength, and they don't believe in borders. I get that. They also seem to think that if only they could control us, we would be better. I don't think I don't think they've thought this through. I think they're just sodding useless. That's what I think.
No, that's an excuse for them. I'm sorry. This is deliberate. Absolutely deliberate. There's no question about it.
So this is all tied in for you.
Absolutely.
Do you think Keir Starmer, do you think Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, and the Tories before them? Let me finish. Do you think they genuinely think that our 14, 15, 16-year-old girls are expendable to rapists from abroad then? Do you think that?
I don't think Keir Starmer's running anything. I think he's a puppetician, as Neil Oliver calls him. Actually, no, Neil Oliver. He's working for the larger corporations like BlackRock, like State Street, like Vanguard, who are controlling him. He's having regular meetings with BlackRock, isn't he?
But all politicians have meetings with big investment banks and things. They all do that. So, I mean, look, all politicians want to be in with big business. Do you honestly think
that Keir Starmer is running anything? He is being told what to do. He is a puppet. And if it wasn't him in power, it would be someone else saying the same things.
You think they're all the same?
Sunak was the same, wasn't he? They're all the bloody same. And this is a deliberate ploy to make us distrust the government. They don't want a government. They want a one-world UN-led government. That's what it's all about.
Look, there's no doubt at all. This is definitely a political class that thinks if ordinary people didn't have their say, things would be run much more efficiently and better. They think that they are much cleverer on all of this stuff than the rest of us. But I don't believe it's a conspiracy.
All members of the Fabian Society.
No, you see, that's up there with QAnon as a silly conspiracy.
Mr. Blair and
that's just a conspiracy theory. People from the same party are members of the same organisation.
What is the emblem of the Fabian Society?
Honestly, this is a conspiracy theory, Nick. This is a conspiracy theory.
A wolf in sheep's clothing, isn't it?
Well, they wouldn't be that obvious, would they? They're clever enough to. If you think they're clever enough to have a conspiracy, can we get back to the issue in hand? I'm going to do that. You're entitled to your view. We're free to say it. I'd push back on it. I don't think there is a conspiracy again because they're not competent enough to do it. But
you would say that.
I would. Because am I controlled opposition?
Are you? I don't know.
Well, I know, but that's the thing. It's just like. I'm not. I just say it as I find it. That's all. But Nick, I want to come back to the issue of what is going on in your town. Okay. In terms of like what the men, and I assume some women as well, would do in the event that they think there's a problem, there's a concern about the safety, what would they do?
The patrol basically has been set up to provide some reassurance to the people of the town. We're hands off. We're not going to get involved if unless someone's being assaulted. Obviously, like any citizen, without this
get involved. Yeah.
I would go and help.
And they're not going to be armed with weapons.
I put a logo on my baseball cap. Makes no difference. I'm just a citizen. And if someone's in trouble, I'll go and help them.
But they're going to all have walkie-talkies to communicate with each other if they think there's trouble.
We're going to have walkie-talkies. So if you are being attacked for it, or say you've gone to help someone who's being attacked and you need some help.
You can get back up.
you can get back up.
Do you think, just finally, do you think it's quite a stain on our society that ordinary law-abiding people should feel that they need to set this up to keep people safe?
Of course it is. I mean, it's ridiculous that we've got 540 to 600 men on a 90-day rotation coming to this town, but a police station that's only open between 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Totally.
Shut on Sundays.
Yeah.
All day.
I couldn't agree with you on that more. Nick Jones, appreciate you coming on the show, founder of Crowborough Patrol. Tom Slater, listening to all of that. You were chuckling away. It's a very serious topic, but I mean, we went off on something of a tangent.
Yeah, I wasn't chuckling.
No, absolutely not that. No. I mean, again, I disagree with it, but I know a lot of people, and I get a lot of this on social media, and a lot of people, you're controlled opposition if you don't agree with it. Do you think, look, Spiked Online have exposed an awful lot of stuff. You've been at vanguard of a lot of the issues like tackling lockdown and a lot of the sort of culture wars. Do you think there is a conspiracy?
No, I mean, I think
part of the controlled opposition.
Exactly, and that was a bit I was chuckling at, because especially when you've invited someone onto your show to talk about not only the group that they've set up, but also the issues to then throw his accusations around is a little odd. I'm grateful, if nothing else. But
I don't mind that. He's entitled to say whatever he wants to say.
He's entitled to his views, absolutely. But I as you say, there are a lot of issues confronting the country. And the idea that it's some conspiracy, to me, just doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense. It's a question of ideology to a certain extent. It's a question of blinkers. It's also, there are, of course, such a thing as people who, if not benefit from the status quo, don't feel the impacts of it. And that's where I think the core thing.
That's, I think.
It's not that they're kind of coining it in off of this, or someone rich is telling them to do it.
Yeah.
They are insulated from the negative economic and social effects of their own policies.
I would love it if our politicians were both competent and in touch enough to actually do this stuff, but they're not. 12:50 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about what is going on in Australia. That social media ban for under-16s is coming in later today, UK time. But is it coming here? And will it work? This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:53 is the time. Let's talk about social media. I think most parents are pretty unhappy about their kids using social media, but an awful lot of parents, frankly, don't seem to care enough and quite happy for their kids to be on social media if it means they're not talking to them or causing a scene. But Australia is among the first country in the world to try to organise a social media ban for all under 16-year-olds. It comes into force later today, UK time, Wednesday, of course, Australian time. And basically, you won't be able to set up a new account. Existing profiles will have to be deactivated. You have to verify that you are over 16 to use TikTok and many of the other popular social media platforms. But is it going to work? And what implications are there for everyone else, not just around the world, but also adults? Let's talk about this to Jo Bartosz. She's assistant editor at The Critic. Hello, Jo.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us. I think there are a lot of parents like me. I mean, I don't have an issue with my daughter in terms of social media. She wasn't one of those kids, but a lot of kids sitting there all the time, boys and girls, not healthy for them. We've seen kids who've committed suicide. They've been, basically led into the idea that, like, you're trans, or promoting anorexia, bullying, being groomed by, sexual predators, you name it. Doesn't seem to be a good place for our kids to be. They should be out and about, playing sport, having a laugh with their mates face to face. But is this social media ban, is it actually going to be enforceable?
You know what, I think it is. So, we saw similar sort of complaints when the Online Safety Act was introduced, when age verification came into effect, and there were a lot of naysayers saying that kids would just find a way around it. And actually, when you look at the data, Pornhub itself reported that 77% fewer visits from the UK. Wow. And it's not even like it's being rerouted to, I don't know, Algeria or somewhere random. This is actually showing that.
I thought we were all just supposed to get VPNs or go on the dark web or something, and then we could all access. All the boys in the studio, in the office, looking a bit shy at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously kids and young people tend to be better and sort of, digital natives are always going to be able to find ways around it. But actually, that hasn't happened. And I think just having that small check, just that small sort of piece of accountability, whether it's age verification or any sort of law, just makes people take a step back and think. Yeah. And I think that is something that works.
And taking away the sort of the normalisation of it. I know we've talked to you about your brilliant book, Pornocracy, you've co-authored, and again, just like the normalisation of particularly, some really nasty stuff on social media. But we're not, in this case, you mentioned Pornhub there, but, this is about, supposedly all this innocent stuff with kids and TikTok videos and dances. And I think, frankly, all this stuff is absolutely horrific. I'm horrified that all these youngsters are getting their news from TikTok. That is not where you should be getting your news. Apparently, I'm big on TikTok. What a joy. But there we are. But, isn't there always an issue with age verification, where to verify who you are and that you're old enough, whether it's 16 or 18, you're having to give your identity, and a lot of people don't want to give their identity, and they don't want to give their biometric details. They don't want to basically, have some company. I mean, banks are being constantly under cyber attack. I'm not entirely sure that, TikTok or Pornhub or anyone are able to necessarily protect their data.
Oh, I mean, their whole business model depends on extracting data. I mean, they're not in it for the good of humanity. They're in it because they want your kids' data. They want to be able to track their eye movements. They want to be able to, use as much of their information as they can. So I totally get that there is a concern there about the sharing of data. But actually, when it comes to what's being proposed, it's facial age verification for the most part.
So
it's been left up to the platforms themselves to decide how they want to implement
and they're going to get big fines if they get it wrong. But haven't there been cases where kids are just putting a picture of their mum or their dad up, and then they go, yeah, you look over 16, not a problem?
Yes, there have. But the point about this law is it won't persecute the parents, it won't persecute the children. If that happens, it'll be the social media platforms themselves that will have to be accountable. And I think that's the right way to look at it, because, these are multi-billion-dollar organisations that, frankly, parents don't stand a chance against.
No. And again, they probably don't stand a chance in terms of keeping their kids off. There's also that argument, isn't there? Well, not every kid's going to comply with the law, but then they don't when it comes to drinking and smoking and drugs. But we still have those laws. There is that, let's face it, that massive concern over people's individual freedoms, civil liberties. If they can do this for under 16s, they'll do it for 18 plus as well.
Yeah, no, I understand the concerns around freedom of expression and data security. I do think there's a concern there, but at the same time, frankly, as you were saying to your previous contributor, I don't think governments are frankly up together enough to implement any sort of mass surveillance.
They'd love to be that competent, wouldn't they? Joe Bartosh, I'm sorry it's so short and sweet. I'm sure we're going to talk about this topic again. Assistant editor at The Critic, Joe Bartosh there. Tom said, you've always been a big concern about, civil liberties. Would that worry you, this, even though it involves kids?